Emeralds Are Forever, Love on the Run, Book 2. Written by Jacqueline Hardy, narrated by Kimberly G. Tisor. Chapter 1. Ben dropped his headphones onto the desk and let out a loud, "Yes!" The retrieval of Cleopatra's earrings had gone without a hitch, and Carlie was on her way home. The museum would be thrilled to have a matching set. He watched as the plane took off before standing to stretch. Now that the job was done, he could concentrate on the article he was supposed to be writing for the newspaper. But first, he needed to go get some groceries. He grabbed an apple out of the fridge, then found a baseball cap to hide his hair. He'd have to shower later that night. Going between Ed for Carlie's team and Ben Wilson for the newspaper could be exhausting, but it also meant getting the scoop for the newspaper before anyone else did. A warm breeze welcomed him as he left the house and climbed into his old Honda. It had been unseasonably hot and hadn't cooled down even after dark. The grocery store was empty for a Thursday night, but Ben preferred it that way. He pushed a cart inside and made his way down the aisles. Produce, bread, cereal. He ticked his list off in his head as he went. "Excuse me?" A woman's voice jolted Ben out of his thoughts. He turned to find a woman smiling up at him. Her hair was tied up in a ponytail, and her striking green eyes stared into his. It took a moment for him to realize he was just standing there. Hi. He tried to figure out how to get his cart around her, but his brain didn't seem to want to work. The woman pointed at a bottle of vanilla extract on the top shelf. "Can you get that for me? I'm rather vertically challenged." Ben laughed and handed it to her. "Vertically challenged?" "I like it better than calling myself short. Thank you." She set the bottle into her basket. "You're welcome." He pushed past her, trying to get distance between them so his mind would work again. Clearly, he needed to step away from the computer more often so he'd know what to say to women, or people in general. After passing each other 3 more times going down the aisles, the woman laughed. "We can't keep running into each other like this." Ben grinned. "If I didn't know any better, I'd say you were stalking me." She raised a hand. "Guilty. I swear I know you from somewhere. It's been driving me crazy trying to figure out where." "I would remember if I'd met you." Ben stopped, realizing what he'd just said. He put his hand out. "I'm Ben." "Deirdre." She took his hand, and a shiver of electricity went through him. Ben dropped her hand, but could still feel her soft skin and firm grip. "I better get going. I have to get my article turned in. Not that you needed to know that." "Article?" Her eyes brightened. "You work for a paper?" "Yeah, well, sort of. I mean, I write articles for the paper, but I do other things too." "Shut your mouth, Ben." "Well, see you around." He turned and walked toward the cashier, mentally cursing himself. He'd been smooth once upon a time, but then the only girl he'd really talked to for the last few months was Carlie, as he helped her on missions. That didn't count because she was married. Deirdre wasn't anywhere around as he paid and went out to the car. It was probably better that way anyway. He couldn't exactly pay attention to someone when he was supposed to be helping his team through missions. That didn't stop him from glancing around the parking lot to see if he could find her one more time, though. His phone rang as he pulled out onto the road. "Hey, Carlie, what's up?" "I just heard from Braden. He said there's something going on at the airport where I'm supposed to land. Can you check it out?" Her voice was muffled, but then it was coming from a phone in the heel of her shoe. Ben sighed. So much for working on his article. "I'm heading home right now. Give me a sec. How long until you land?" 3 hours. And Ed, make sure Braden isn't anywhere near the airport if there's trouble." "Will do. Everything you need is in that bag. Be ready." Ben hung up and checked his car's computer for traffic jams. It was too close to rush hour for his comfort, so he turned down a side street. He pushed a button on his car radio and waited for the computer to pull up Carlie's flight. She was halfway across the Atlantic by that time. She was closer to landing than she thought. He cursed and pushed his foot down on the gas. As soon as he pulled into his driveway, he grabbed the bags of groceries and hurried into the house. The computers in Ben's office hummed, calming his nerves. He pulled up the surveillance of the Atlanta airport. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, but anyone who was after the earrings would know better than to be seen on the normal cameras. A few codes and another hack, and he was into the mainframe. He sat back in his chair and watched as the computer cycled through. There. Ben leaned forward and played back the video. Apparently, Frank wasn't out of commission. Ben swore and grabbed his phone. Come on, answer, he muttered until the other line picked up. Please tell me you're waiting at the airport for Carlie right now. Braden laughed. Hello to you, too. Listen, Frank is there, right by the gate that Carlie is coming through. I'm going to try to reroute the plane, but if that doesn't happen, you need to be ready to take him out. Way ahead of you. He's in my sight. Just make sure that plane doesn't show up here. I'll do my best. Ben stared at his phone before punching in another number. I need to report a medical emergency. Ben swept the remnants of his phone into his garbage. He hated getting rid of the phone, but he couldn't let anyone trace it back to him. The plane was now on its way to JFK, and hopefully Frank wouldn't have time to get there before it landed. He walked into the kitchen to put away his groceries. A piece of paper fluttered to the ground from one of the bags. Ben tensed. Did Frank know he was onto him? He picked it up with 2 fingers and caught a familiar scent. How? He chuckled when he opened the paper to find Deirdre's phone number written on it, along with a smiley face. Maybe he hadn't made a fool of himself after all. But how had she gotten into his bag without him noticing? The thought that she could be a spy crossed his mind, but he pushed it away. After making a sandwich and grabbing a drink, Ben went back to his office to work. The paper with Deirdre's phone number sat next to him on the desk. He could call, but then he would seem desperate. That's the last thing he needed right then. Ben stared at the blank document on the screen in front of him, trying to figure out how to start the article. Finding Cleopatra's earrings had been fairly easy once they had the necklace in hand, but he couldn't exactly put that in there. As he typed, his eyes kept drifting over to the paper. It had been a few hours since he was at the store. Surely that was long enough. He grabbed another phone out of the drawer and started to type in her number. No, he wouldn't call. Maybe just a text then. Hey, this is Ben. We met at the store today. Want to go out for dinner sometime? Lame? Probably. But at least it was a start. He hit enter and set his phone down. Now the ball was in her court and Ben could concentrate on work. A little history of the jewels, along with where the necklace was found, would be great in the article, just to make sure people remembered from the last article he'd written. He smiled as he wrote his version, the accurate version, of how it had been recovered. So many papers had gotten it wrong, even though he'd personally written the press release for it. Next came the retrieval of the earrings. They were found in a crypt under the British Museum that most of the museum curators hadn't even known about. And now they were on their way back to the U.S. to be reunited with the necklace. Ben read through the article a few times to make sure everything was correct, then double-checked the display date. He'd booked it the night before with a tentative date in case Carlie got into trouble again. A text popped up on Ben's phone. That sounds great. How does tomorrow night sound? Ben tapped his phone against the table. Tomorrow. He'd planned to take off to New York, but maybe that could wait a day. The ceremony for the museum wasn't for another week. In this way, he could catch up on some other work. Perfect. I'll pick you up at 8 o'clock. I look forward to it. Ben pumped his fist in mock celebration. He'd actually managed to get a date. His already good day had just gotten much better. Chapter 2. Deirdre, or Dee, as her friends called her, stared at her phone with a grin on her face. She couldn't wait to tell Carlie about Ben. Speaking of which, she should have been home by now. Dee checked the time and sent a quick text. Trying to keep up with her was almost impossible now that she was married. Not that it had been easy before that. Hey, Dee, Danny, her roommate, poked her head into Dee's room. What's up with you? I just met the most gorgeous guy. Dee flopped back on her bed. We're supposed to have dinner tomorrow. Danny came into the room and plopped on the bed next to Dee. Okay, spill. I had to grab some groceries on the way home from the gym and stopped at this little store just off the freeway. This guy helped me get some vanilla off the top shelf, and then we kept running into each other over and over. So let me get this straight. You stop at a random store at midnight, talk to a complete stranger, and then give him your number? Danny rolled her eyes. Only you. Dee threw a pillow at her. Hey, I don't normally do this. Uh-huh. First, there was your Pilates instructor that you just happened to run into at the dentist and ended having dinner with him that night. Then there was the intern in your math lab that helped you with your homework. Admit it, you have a problem. I totally don't. She rolled over to face Danny. What did you need? Danny blinked. I totally forgot. Do you have any extra soap? I ran out and don't want to run to the store this late at night. Who knows, I might run into some crazy guy who I decide to ask on a date. Dee laughed and threw another pillow at her. There's some in the pantry that Carlie didn't take with her. Thanks. Danny left the room. Maybe it had been crazy to give him her number, but she couldn't help it. She knew him from somewhere, and she was determined to figure out why. When he was counting out his change, she'd slipped her number into his bag as she left the store. Still, no text from Carlie. Dee was going to have to give her a piece of her mind when she finally heard back. She pulled out her homework to look through the final she'd be taking in the morning and forced herself to study. If Carlie was successful on this trip, Dee would be making another last-minute visit to New York, and she wanted to make sure she had her finals done before then. Except that every time she tried to read a paragraph, Ben floated through her mind. Those brown eyes and his dark, tousled hair made her want to text back and move the date to tonight instead. No, she couldn't think like that. She had work to do. With only a couple of semesters left for college, Dee was going stir-crazy. She had been going to school for way too long. It was time to be done. She set the timer for an hour, promising herself that she could take a break when it went off. Her economics class might kill her, but she still had to study for it. Dee let out a whoop as soon as the alarm went off. She slammed her book closed and left her room to go find some ice cream. There wasn't much left in the freezer, but it would have to do. She could hear Danny singing to her music in the other room, which meant her studying was going about as well as Dee's had. Nothing else was on, so Dee flipped to the news station. With the impending trip to New York, it was good to know what the weather was like so she could pick out a dress. She opened the lid and took a bite, savoring the minty chocolate flavor, her favorite. We are coming to you live from JFK Airport, where the flight has just landed. Emergency crews are on the runway, waiting to take a patient straight into quarantine. It is too early to know what the patient has contracted, but our sources say it could be tuberculosis. We'll keep you updated as the story unfolds. Dee's mouth hung open as the ice cream on her spoon dripped into the carton below it. That was Carlie's plane. She was sure of it. The flight number matched the one she'd been watching for, but it had landed at the wrong airport. Hey, Dee, what's wrong? Danny glanced between the TV and Dee's face. You're pale. What was Carlie's flight number again? Dee asked, trying to stay calm. Maybe she'd written it down wrong. Danny checked her phone and rattled off the 4 numbers Dee had been dreading. She should have called by now, right? Dee set down the ice cream and pulled out her own phone. Yes, she should have, but I don't think she can. What do you mean? Watch. Dee nodded toward the TV while she dialed Braden's number. Please tell me she's not the one with TB. Braden didn't say anything at first, and Dee had to check to make sure the call was still connected. Muffled sounds came from the other side of the line before he finally spoke. That's a trick question, but the short answer is she's fine. Things went a little South, but we took care of it. I'm heading there now. I'll be on the first plane. No, that'll make things worse. No offense. Braden's voice was drowned out for a second. Avoiding drama. Dee grumbled. I'm not drama. But fine. I'll stick around here, but you better make sure she calls as soon as she can. Got it. The call dropped. Dee grabbed the forgotten ice cream and shoved a spoonful into her mouth. Carlie had better be okay, or she was going to be in so much trouble when she got back. Chapter 3. Ben readjusted the collar on his shirt for the 100th time. He couldn't even remember the last time he'd been on a date, and he had no idea what he should be wearing for his date that night. But the clock was ticking, and he was supposed to be leaving any minute now to pick Deirdre up. The flowers he'd picked up sat on the table. He'd debated getting chocolates, but figured that was overkill. He gave up on the collar and brushed his teeth instead. His hair was its usual unruly self, but there wasn't much he could do about that. Carlie and Braden were back at their rental apartment in New York City. His news article had been sent in just minutes before he started getting ready, and he was now ready for his date. Except that he wasn't. Nerves had him second-guessing everything. It was time to leave or he would decide not to go through with it, and Deirdre was worth it. He walked past his bike and climbed into his car. His guys had been over there throughout the day making sure it looked like a regular car and given it a new paint job. Apparently, they thought he needed to go out as much as he had. Deirdre's house was a few miles away, which shouldn't have taken long, but traffic was heavy. He turned down a side road and used the GPS to find a different way there. He was a few minutes late, but there wasn't much he could do about it. He picked up the flowers and checked himself in the mirror one more time before going up to her apartment. He made sure he had the right one, then knocked on the door. A moment later, a short blonde woman answered the door. Her eyes widened. Hey, I'm looking for Deirdre? His voice shook, which made her smirk. She moved out of the way so he could enter the apartment. She's almost done getting ready. I'll let her know you're here. I'm Danny, by the way. Ben shook her hand. I'm Ben. It's nice to meet you. Danny walked into a room and Ben could hear laughter. She poked her head out of the room. She'll be right out. You can have a seat if you want. Thanks. Ben moved over to a couch and sat down, taking in the apartment. It looked like any other college apartment, but with homey touches. Pictures covered the walls, and the shelves by the TV were packed with CDs and movies. They loved their classics, along with some of the newer releases. Sorry I'm late. I couldn't stop hitting the snooze button. Deirdre stood in the doorway in a black dress that made Ben's jaw drop. It's all good. Ben stood and handed her the flowers. I hope you like daffodils. They're my favorite, and I couldn't help getting them. Deirdre took them from him. They're beautiful, and they happen to be my favorite flower as well. Perfect. Danny rolled her eyes and took the flowers from Dee. I'll take care of these. You two head off on your date. Deirdre took a wrap from off a coat hook, and Ben helped put it around her shoulders. She turned to Danny. Be back later. Don't get into any trouble. I should say the same for you two. Danny grinned as she filled a vase with water. Ben opened the door and waited for Deirdre to go through before following after her. Your roommate seems nice. She's the best. We've roomed together since freshman year. There were 4 of us all the way through, but the others have married and gone off to other adventures. Deirdre climbed into his car. Ben hurried around to the other side and climbed in as well. How does Italian sound? Sounds good to me. Deirdre put on her seatbelt. Ben pulled out of the parking lot and headed for his favorite Italian restaurant. They'd barely make the reservations as long as traffic had calmed down in the few minutes he'd been in her apartment. So, how was your day? Not bad. Aced my economics class and then slept for the rest of the day. Good job on the test. Is that your major? Ben stopped at a stoplight and looked over at her. He still couldn't believe she was sitting next to him. He'd thought she was beautiful before, but the dress and her makeup made her breathtaking. She shook her head. I'm almost done with my anthropology major. I just had to finish the last general class. I put it off to the end.
Ah, I would too, Ben laughed. There's a reason I went into journalism instead of anything to do with economics or math.
Don't you need it for your pieces, though?
If I were working on those types of articles, sure. I know enough to get me through the articles about the arts or sports.
Ben was silent for a moment.
I guess I do more with economics than I thought I did.
He pulled into the parking lot and stopped the car.
Here we are.
Deirdre's eyes widened. I've heard about this place. It's impossible to get into.
It isn't if you have the right connections.
Ben grinned and got out so he could open her door for her, but she'd already climbed out. Soft music played in the background of the restaurant as they walked inside. A man stood at the desk and looked up when they walked in.
Hello, sir. Can I get your name? Ben Thompson.
The man looked down the list before nodding and picking up 2 menus.
Right this way.
They walked past several other tables before they stopped in front of a table.
Will this do?
His usual table. Ben smiled.
It's perfect. Thank you.
He helped Deirdre into her seat, then pulled out his own chair. The waiter handed him their menus, then bowed and walked away. Wow, this is fancy. Deirdre picked up her menu. Do you have any suggestions?
The carbonara is my favorite, and I highly recommend their bread.
Ben set his menu down. He had the thing memorized anyway. Sounds perfect. How were their Italian sodas? Deirdre folded her menu and set it on the table. The green in her eyes was accented by the green of her eyeshadow, pulling Ben into their depths. Ben cleared his throat.
I actually don't know. I usually just get a Coke.
You really are a man after my own heart. I'll have the same thing. She smiled up at the waiter as he came by. The waiter pulled out his notebook.
Have you decided what you're going to order? We'll both have the carbonara and some of your garlic bread. Oh, and 2 Cokes, please.
Oh, and could I get a squeeze of lemon in mine? Deirdre batted her eyelashes. Ben wondered if she had any idea what effect she had on the guys around her. The waiter seemed as smitten as Ben was.
Of course, I'll have those right out to you.
He took the menus and turned to leave.
A squeeze of lemon?
Ben raised an eyebrow. Deirdre shrugged. It just gives it that extra kick.
Nice.
He folded his arms on the table.
So, how much school do you have left?
Not much. I'm thinking of doubling up next semester so I can get done faster. Deirdre took a slice of bread from the tray the waiter brought. She took a bite and closed her eyes. Oh, man, you weren't kidding. Ben laughed.
I told you it was good.
She finished chewing and pulled another piece off. What about you? How long have you worked for the paper? Ben thought back.
Let's see. It'll be 3 years this June. I started as a junior in college and have moved up a few times since.
That's amazing. I'd love to write, but I can barely survive my research papers.
I've written since I was 5. I just wouldn't let anyone read what I wrote until college.
Ben laughed.
But really, I find it easier than the research papers I wrote in college. I still have to check facts and make sure everything is accurate, but all of this is real life. It's happening right now, and I get to make sure the world knows about it. I love it.
Deirdre nodded. I can see that. I can't wait to get out of school so I can actually apply what I've learned. Ben's phone buzzed, but he ignored it. Thoughts of Carlie being in trouble crossed his mind. But he was on a date, and he didn't want Deirdre knowing of that part of his life. Aren't you going to get that? Deirdre asked.
It's probably work. I can call them later tonight.
Ben cringed when the phone went off again. Deirdre leaned forward. Look, you just told me how much you want to change the world with your stories. What if there's a breaking news story? You don't want to miss it, do you?
Good point. I'll be back.
Ben grabbed his phone and hurried out into the lobby.
What's up, Carlie?
You know that emerald that was sold at the auction last year? Excitement was evident in her voice, and Ben knew he was in for another adventure before she even said the words.
Yeah?
Braden just tracked it down. We think we can get to it. Ben sighed and rubbed his forehead.
You're not even out of trouble from your last trip. You really want to get into this?
There was murmuring on the other end before she answered again. We are out for the summer, which means no class. It's the perfect time. Besides, if we don't move quickly, we'll lose our chance to grab it.
And the show?
We'll leave after that. Ben poked his head around the corner to see Deirdre checking her own cell phone.
Fine. Send me the details. I'm going back to my date.
He knew it was a mistake before the words were completely out of his mouth. The squeal on the other side of the phone confirmed it. You're on a date? Finally! You're going to have to spill as soon as I get back.
Not if I can help it.
He hung up and turned toward the dining room when he got a text from his boss. His breath caught. Deirdre looked up with a smile, but it dropped to a frown. What's going on? Ben slid the phone across the table.
Recognize that park?
She gasped. That's right by my house.
That's what I thought. They're waiting for the guy to make his move right now.
A man had been seen over the last few days trying to lure women back to his house. She picked up his phone and scanned the text. I knew it. Something was off this morning. Ben frowned.
You felt him there?
I felt someone watching me. I didn't stick around to find out what was going on.
It's a good thing you didn't.
Ben picked up his fork and took a bite of his food before realizing that Deirdre was staring at him.
You want to go see if we can catch him.
Deirdre hesitated. If that's okay with you.
Are you kidding? I never pass up a good stakeout. Let's go.
He flagged down a waiter for 2 cartons. This wasn't exactly how he'd wanted his date to go, but if it meant her safety, he'd do whatever it took. Deirdre took her food out of the bag and handed Ben his carton. You just sit here until something happens?
Yep. He may not show, though. There are a few more cars here than there usually are, and he may suspect something.
He opened his carton and took a bite of the carbonara.
Just as good as if we were eating it at the restaurant.
Definitely. Deirdre took another bite, keeping an eye on the window. Hey, is that the guy? Ben looked in the direction Deirdre pointed. A man stood off among the trees, staring out at the sidewalk. He scanned the area to make sure the police were still in their cars.
I think it is.
Deirdre shivered. So he just stands there? How creepy.
You hope he just stands there instead of attacking women.
Ben opened the glove compartment and pulled out his binoculars. Holding his plate in one hand, he held the binoculars.
I'd say white guy, maybe 5'10", with short hair. No, he's got it pulled back. The clothes are baggy on him.
Deirdre grabbed her phone and wrote them down. Will you give this to the police?
Not unless they ask. They're probably writing it down too.
Ben turned his binoculars toward the sidewalk.
Problem is, no one is out this late at night. We could be here for hours.
He turned to Dee.
Want to stick around?
Are you kidding me? I want this guy out of here. Besides, I'm enjoying the company. Deirdre smiled over at him.
I was thinking the same thing.
Ben set the binoculars down and took a bite of his food. It was a good thing he didn't have anything the next day. He was pretty sure they'd be there all night. Chapter 4. Dee suppressed a yawn and checked her phone again. It was almost 2 in the morning and the guy hadn't moved. Danny had already given up and gone to bed, and Dee was ready for sleep herself. Ben typed away at his computer, writing down everything they knew so far, which was pretty much nothing. Shouldn't just standing there count for something? Loitering, maybe? Dee wasn't creeped out anymore. It had gone from that to just plain annoyed. This was her jogging path, and he had no right to be there.
You'd think so, but they want to get him for actually doing something.
Ben glanced over at her.
Want me to take you home? I have a feeling this is going to take a long time.
Dee shook her head. If we leave now, it'll spook him. But what if we speed things up a bit?
What do you mean?
His eyes widened.
No.
Something has to get this going. Just make sure the police stop him, okay? Dee slipped out of the car and gently shut the door so she wouldn't give herself away. Her heart thumped in her throat, but she kept telling herself she'd be protected. She walked down the sidewalk. Her heels clicked on the sidewalk, and as she got closer to where the man stood, The feeling from that morning returned full force. The man left the trees and followed closely behind her. It took every ounce of control for her to keep going. What had she been thinking? Hands reached out and grabbed for her. They were rough on her skin, and as he pulled her closer, she caught the smell of alcohol and sweat. She screamed, earning a laugh from him. "Out with your hands up!" Lights flooded the area, and police flowed from all directions, cutting the man off from escape. His fingers tightened on her arm, and she felt something poke into her back. "Get away or she's dead." The police in front of them held up their hands in surrender. Dee's heart thundered in her ears. Why hadn't she just stayed in the car? Suddenly, the man jerked forward and his grip loosened. Ben stood behind them with his backpack in his hand. The man lay unconscious on the ground. The police started forward and grabbed the man to cuff him. Ben pulled Dee into his arms. "What were you thinking?" Dee just shook her head and let out a sob. "Come on, let's get you out of here before people ask questions." Ben pulled her into the trees and helped her into the car. He drove her home and helped her upstairs. "Would your roommate be awake?" Dee nodded and pulled her keys out of her purse. She fumbled with the door, so Ben took the keys and unlocked the door. She allowed him to scoop her up and walk inside. He set her on the couch and pulled a blanket up onto her. "Now, will you please tell me what you were thinking?" His gentle voice had turned to anger. "We needed him to move, and I made that happen." "You did what?" The hysteria in Danny's voice mirrored the anger in Ben's. She turned and slugged Ben's arm. "Why'd you let her do that?" Ben stood. "I didn't. She took off before I could do anything." Danny pointed to the door. "Leave." "Fine. Thank you for dinner, Deirdre." The door slammed behind him, and Danny crawled onto the couch next to Dee. "You've done some stupid things in your life, Deirdre Ann, but this takes the cake." Danny laid her head on Dee's shoulder. "I know." Dee's heartbeat was slowly returning to normal, and the adrenaline drained from her, leaving her shaking. Danny grabbed another blanket from the couch. Was the date really that bad? I mean, usually people don't go running off like that if it wasn't. Dee chuckled. "No, it was actually perfect. When we heard about this guy, I was the one who insisted that we help track him down." "Being Carlie's roommate has worn off on you, I think." Danny turned on the TV and flipped it to a cheesy chick flick. Dee tried to pay attention, but her mind kept drifting back to the look on Ben's face. She had seriously messed things up with him. They'd caught the guy, but she'd probably just lost any chance she'd had with the guy she could have spent the rest of her life with. Typical. "You're sure you have the tickets?" Danny called from the other room. "They're on my phone," Dee called back. She grabbed a few pairs of shoes and threw them into her bag, then zipped it shut. Her flight to New York was in a few hours, and Dee couldn't wait to get out of this city. Ben had never called back, and it hurt worse than she'd expected. The newspaper on the bed had a picture of her on the front cover. It was blurred, and her name was left out of the article, but it was still her. Ben had written the news story, and Dee had to admit that he was a great writer. "Ready?" Danny stood in the doorway with a grin on her face. "Yep." Dee grabbed her bag and her purse and followed Danny out of the apartment. They locked the door and headed to Danny's car. She pulled out of the parking lot and headed for the airport. "You sure you can't get out of work?" Danny shook her head. "I tried everything. Everyone else is off so they can go home for the summer. I'm so annoyed." Dee sighed. "But you can try for the weekend, right? I have 2 tickets to Broadway and no one to go with. I'll do my best. I have a few more things to do, but I should easily be done by then." Danny pulled onto the freeway. "And if not, you can always go with Carlie." "I wish. She's taking off to get some emerald after this." Dee rolled her eyes. "Maybe one of these days she'll come back and teach." "Doubtful. She's having too much fun." Danny turned up the radio. "Besides, when you have a hottie like Braden to travel with, why stay home?" Dee shook her head. "They're married. They could stay home and still be together." "Yes, but that's not nearly as fun." "Good point." Dee ran through everything in her bag again, making sure she had what she needed. Not that it mattered at this point. She had no time to turn back around. The drop-off was packed, and by the time they were able to find a place to pull over, Dee was cutting it close to her flight time. Dee leaned down to look into the car. "See you when I get back. Give Carlie a hug for me, and don't do anything crazy." "I never do." Dee waved and ran inside the airport. Security was blessedly short, but Dee still had to run to her gate. She dropped into her seat with only a few minutes remaining. She really needed to leave sooner next time, which is exactly what she said every time she flew. The pilot welcomed everyone onto the flight, and Dee settled into her seat. She was so ready for this vacation. Something had to take her mind off of Ben. She'd gone grocery shopping at the same store every night that week, hoping to run into him when he wouldn't return her calls. It was time to move on, but her heart wasn't quite ready yet. Dee zipped up her dress and stood in front of the mirror. The green mermaid-style dress wasn't something she normally would have bought, but she had to admit it worked for her. She pulled her hair up into a bun at the nape of her neck. There was a knock on the door of the hotel room. Carlie stood in the hall and grinned when Dee opened the door. They squealed and Dee grabbed her in a hug. It had been a month since Carlie had last been in town. Carlie pulled away. "Thank you for coming." "Like I'd miss your exhibit." Dee held her at arm's length. "You don't look like someone who just fought a dreadful disease." Carlie rolled her eyes. "And you don't look like someone who used herself as bait." "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking we'd catch him easier if something was actually happening." Dee turned away and slipped on her shoes. "Oh, and Danny wanted me to give you a hug. She's so bummed she had to miss out." "I get it. She's wanted to hit the manager position for so long, and this is the only way to make that happen." Dee found the pearl necklace from her mom and put it on. "I think she'll get it this time." "You look so great." Carlie sat on the bed. "I know basics, but I want to know how things are." "How's the new apartment?" Dee finished applying her lipstick. "It's quieter without you, but it was a definite upgrade from our last place." Anything was an upgrade from her last apartment. Carlie stood and checked her makeup. "We should probably get going. Braden's down in the limo." "Maybe you should have told me that 5 minutes ago." Dee smoothed her dress and made sure she had her hotel key in her phone case. She followed Carlie down to the lobby and met Braden at the door. He slid his arm around Carlie's waist and kissed her forehead. "I was beginning to think you two forgot about the exhibit tonight." "We did. We're just coming down for dinner." Carlie winked and climbed into the limo. Dee climbed in next. "Wow, this is amazing." "I told them we didn't need something so fancy, but they insisted." Carlie opened a small fridge. "Drink, anyone? Don't you get charged for those?" Carlie shrugged. "They told me I could have whatever I wanted." She handed Dee and Braden each a Coke and grabbed a water bottle for herself. "This thing is stocked with all of my favorite snacks. It's crazy." "I guess that's what happens when you fill their museum with jewelry that's been lost for centuries." Dee leaned forward. "Okay, so what's this emerald you're so excited to go after?" "A few years ago, they discovered this shipwreck that was 400 years old. It had a bunch of other stuff, but there was this emerald that's the largest they've ever found. It was sold in Thailand while we were there, and we just found out where it's being kept." "And I assume you don't want to just buy it from them?" Dee asked. Carlie shook her head. "They shouldn't have gotten it in the first place. It was stolen before it could go to the actual auction it was supposed to be sold at, and we want to make sure it gets there." "Fair enough. And you're going to be careful?" Braden laughed. "According to her, she's always careful, but I'll be there to make sure that it happens." "Good." The limo stopped in front of the museum where hundreds of people stood waiting for them. Excitement bubbled up in Dee's stomach as they climbed out and waved to the press. Carlie was escorted through the crowd up to the exhibit, and it was everything Dee could do to keep up. The display for Cleopatra's necklace now contained the earrings that Carlie had found. Cameras flashed, and conversations buzzed around them. Dee accepted a drink from one of the waiters and took a sip. Carlie stood next to the display with her hands covering her face. Dee put an arm around her, and Carlie wiped a tear. "You did it." Dee took another drink and handed it to Carlie. "It took diverting a plane, but you made it happen. Your dad would be so proud." "Thank you." Carlie wiped a tear. "I just can't believe they're together again." Dee laughed. "I can. I know you won't stop until you get what you set out for. Now come on, time to schmooze." "Not my favorite part." Carlie wiped her face again and turned with a smile. "Let's do this." Braden stood a couple of feet away talking to a reporter, so Dee and Carlie joined him. "Oh, here they are. Carlie is the one you want to talk to about the location? Excuse me?" Dee's eyes wandered as she listened to Carlie talk about her find. Hundreds of people mingled throughout the exhibit, talking and laughing. "Wait." Dee gasped and searched the crowd again. It couldn't have been. She walked away from Carlie and tried again to find him. There. Her stomach dropped. Ben. He was here. She wasn't sure if she should be thrilled to death or annoyed. They hadn't exactly left their first date on great terms, but they'd hit it off so well before that. Maybe she should just ignore him. After all, he hadn't seen her yet, and they were quite a ways from home. "Deirdre." Ben's voice sent a shiver through Dee. How could he do that so easily? "What are you doing here?" With a sigh, Dee turned and pasted a smile on her face. "Hey, Ben, I could ask you the same thing." "Newspaper, remember? This is what I do." He held up a press badge. "Right. I'm here with my friend." Dee glanced over at Carlie, but she was busy with other press. Ben's mouth dropped open. You know Carlie?" "Yeah, we were roommates." "Wait, how do you know her?" His reaction was way more than just a journalist finding out about a common friend. He ran his fingers through his hair, messing it up, which made him even better looking. "So you... Oh boy." "What?" "I shouldn't be talking to you." Ben cringed. Too late. Carlie and Braden came toward them. When they got closer, Carlie's smile grew bigger. "I see you guys met. This is Dee. She's my best friend from college. And Dee, this is Ed." "Dee?" "Ed?" The names came out simultaneously as the two of them stared at each other. All of the stories that Carlie had told Dee over the years had been this guy, the one she'd opened her heart to for a night, and he wasn't even who he said he was. Do you two know each other?" Ben leaned forward. "Carlie, this is Deirdre, my date from a few nights ago." Carlie's eyes widened. "I hadn't thought of the fact that it could be her. I mean, we always called her Dee." Everything seemed to be in slow motion. Carlie and Ben seemed to be thrilled with how things had unfolded, but Dee couldn't get past the fact that he'd lied about what he did for a living. "So, you're not a reporter?" Her tone was more accusing than she'd meant it to be. "How much of what you said that night was truth?" Ben raised his hands in surrender. "All of it, I swear." "Whoa, Dee, chill. He's a good guy, really." Carlie nudged Braden forward. "Tell her he's a good guy." Braden laughed. "Sounds like it's time for Ed and me to go find a drink so you ladies can talk." He grabbed Ben by the elbow and pulled him away from them. "Look, he's saved our lives more than once. He's the one who got us out of the house when those creeps came into our house. Remember? And he's the one who got the plane diverted so we could keep the earrings away from Frank and his guys. And besides, I can't think of a better guy for you." That didn't help much. Or at least it shouldn't have. He'd lied about what he did. But then, how was he supposed to admit that he was a handler for some girl who travels the world to collect artifacts? There was no way she would have believed that either. Dee sighed. "He really is a reporter? That's his side job. How else do you think he gets the scoop on my findings? He's the one with all the details." Carlie put a hand on Dee's arm. "Give him a break. If he kept something back, it's because he has to for security's sake. He said his name is Ben. Dee's head spun as she thought back on what she knew of him from Carlie's adventures. Well, that I can't help you with. Dad put me in contact with him, and I only ever knew him as Ed. Carlie stared at Ben and Braden as they talked to a few other guys. He seems more like a Ben, though, and you have to admit he's pretty cute. Dreamy. He's dreamy. Dee touched her hair. Carlie grabbed her by the shoulders. You look perfect. Get over there. Wait, as thrilled as I am that you two met and all that, it's probably better if you don't talk too much here. Too many eyes watching. Carlie cringed when she heard her name called. Man, it's time for my speech. Knock him dead. Dee smiled and clapped with the rest of the group. Dee stayed near the back. Carlie was right. They didn't need any extra attention. Her eyes kept drifting toward Ben. He wrote notes during her speech, but Dee wondered if he already knew what Carlie had been planning to say. Once her speech was done, the crowd slowly dissipated, moving on to other displays or leaving for the night. Dee wandered over to a display of items that had been found in a shipwreck. Gold, goblets, jewelry, all lost for hundreds of years. This is where the emerald will go if I can recover it. Carlie's voice made Dee jump. It's amazing. Dee read the inscription. So, you think it's in Cuba? Nope. I'm pretty sure it's in Germany. Remember the couple I told you about that Braden and I impersonated? It was sold to them as a gift to apologize for the mistake. Dee raised an eyebrow. They sold it for a gift? That makes no sense. You're right. But I don't pretend to know the inner workings of a criminal mind, even if I pretended I was one. Carlie smiled at the memory. I actually realized I was in love with Braden while I was sitting at that table. Dee put a hand to her heart. Such a romantic thought. Carlie snorted. Yes, because meeting in the middle of a grocery store was more romantic. Touché, Dee laughed. Hey, Carlie, we need to get going if we're going to catch our flight. Braden stood behind them. Already? Dee asked, surprised. Carlie handed Dee her phone. We don't have a choice. News got out that we knew where the emerald was, and others want to get there first. I'd hoped we could at least go out for dinner. Disappointment washed over Dee. They hadn't been able to hang out much since Carlie had gotten married. I'm sorry. When I get back, I promise. And give Danny a hug back. Carlie hugged Dee before looping her arm through Braden's. Wish us luck. Dee sighed as they left. She should have been thrilled that she was in New York. But even with its millions of people, she still felt completely alone. Chapter 5. Ben scribbled the last of his notes in his notebook and shoved it into his backpack. He needed to get back to his hotel room and make sure everything was set up for the mission. He'd planned to head home as soon as the show was done, but everything changed when the new intel came in. Deirdre's laughter floated toward him. Dee. He still couldn't believe it. How had he not gotten the fact that she was Carlie's best friend? He'd helped her before he'd even known her. It was no wonder he'd felt the need to protect her from the moment they met. He shouldn't have ignored her after that night. She had done what needed to be done to stop that guy from getting anyone else, and Ben had just shut her out instead of admiring her bravery. And this was why he should never be allowed to talk to anyone. He sighed and waved at the museum curator before leaving. The warm summer air welcomed him, and he regretted having to go back inside of the hotel. Maybe he'd take a walk instead. The sounds of New York City welcomed him as he moved among the crowds of people rushing to wherever their errands took them. It still amazed him how busy it stayed even late into the night here. One reason he preferred a quieter college town in Arizona. But this was where he'd grown up, and he loved coming home. A vendor rolled his cart slowly down the street, and Ben smiled. He hurried to catch up to the stooped man. Still kicking, I see. The man turned and studied Ben for a moment before grinning. Benny! I haven't seen you in years. I thought you'd forgotten me. Never.
Have anything left, Lenny? Ben pulled out his wallet. Let's see what we can find. Lenny opened his cart and pulled out a couple of hot dogs. How's your dad? Ben cringed. I haven't seen him for a while. He still live here? Yeah, a few blocks from here. Lenny's gaze pierced him. And I assume you were going to try to leave the city without seeing him again? Ben shook his head. I hadn't even thought about going to visit, to be honest. Work has me on a tight schedule. Too busy to see your father, Ben. I thought you were better than that. He handed the 2 hot dogs, overflowing with toppings. You're right. I'll do my best to visit him. He handed a wad of bills to Lenny. See you later, Lenny. Thanks for dinner. Lenny stared at the money. You overpaid. A lot. No, I didn't. You deserve every penny. Ben waved the best he could with the hot dogs in his hand and walked down the sidewalk to find a bench to sit on. He took a bite, and it was like he was 10 years old again. Lenny had been a family friend, and Ben had managed to sweet-talk him into countless free hot dogs over the years. Ben stared at the building down the street and debated going to visit. He really needed to get to the hotel to check in. And besides, it was a little late to be knocking on people's doors. But Lenny's disapproving expression plagued him. He popped the last bite into his mouth and wiped his hands. It was now or never. He checked both ways before jogging across the street. The entryway was run down as if it hadn't been painted since Ben had left home. A woman hurried up the steps just in front of him, so Ben grabbed the door and slipped in. It was better if he didn't buzz himself in. His dad wouldn't have let him in anyway. The elevator was out of service, so Ben jogged up the 4 flights of stairs to his dad's apartment. The carpet was threadbare in places, and the wallpaper had seen better days, but he knew this floor like the back of his hand. He hesitated, then knocked on the door. Moments later, the door opened just enough for a man to peek out. Yeah, Dad? Ben's heart was in his throat. It had been longer than he'd remembered. The face staring out at him had aged. The door slammed, and he could hear the chain slide out of its lock. Slowly, the door opened again, just far enough for Ben to slip inside. Books lined the walls and piled up on the tables. Several lay open with writing in the margins. Dad shuffled into the kitchen. Want some coffee? No, I'm pretty full from dinner. Lenny says hi. Ben moved a couple of books off a chair and sat down. Dad grunted. What brings you to New York? Business. Ben pulled out his phone and flipped to the pictures he'd taken that night. My friend found Cleopatra's earrings, so I was here to report on it. Impressive. Dad sat down next to him with a mug for each of them. Ben held in a laugh. It was just like his dad to get him a drink even when Ben said he didn't need one. Thanks for the drink. Of course. Dad studied him. Done with college? For a couple of years now. I'm working for the paper still. Dad nodded. I see. Are you still helping Albert's daughter? Ben jerked at the name. How do you know Albert? Aw, come on. How do you think he had your name to give to Carlie? It wasn't just coincidence. His laugh was raspy. I helped her father long before you were even born. Mom said you were always traveling for work. His dad winked. She never said what I did, right? She didn't like my job. Never approved of it. She's probably rolling in her grave knowing you've taken up my business. Ben picked up a book on the table, trying to process what he'd just learned. His dad had done the same thing. And all these years, Ben had resented him for leaving his mom. He couldn't process it. I loved your mom, Ben. More than anything. She just couldn't handle the work. Didn't want you to have to live without a dad. But I did anyway. The words were bitter on his tongue. Why couldn't you just do like she'd asked? Dad leaned forward. Could you? Of course. But could he? The look of disappointment on Dee's face still tore at him. But he knew that as soon as he left this apartment, he'd still head back to the hotel to help Carlie. And he'd keep doing it because he was good at what he did. Because he loved it. I thought so. His dad stood and went through a few drawers before he found what he was looking for. Here's my list of contacts if you ever find yourself in trouble. Most have retired by now, so only use them if you absolutely need to. And Ben? Be careful.
Ben stood. His mind was spinning from everything he'd just learned. But the weight on his shoulders seemed just a little lighter after talking to his dad. He pulled him into a hug.
Thank you, Dad. No, thank you. I was afraid I wouldn't see you again.
Ben paused at the door.
I almost didn't come, but I'm glad I did. Night.
He checked his phone as he headed down the stairs and was surprised to find a call from Carlie. She should have been on the plane. He clicked on the voicemail. Hey, the flight was delayed for maintenance. We need you to check and see if there's another option for a flight. He cursed under his breath and pulled up flights. Nothing. He dialed her number and left the building.
Hey, I'm not seeing anything. What's up with the flight?
We're not sure. The announcement just said it would be another hour. We've got to get out of here.
I'll check flights for the other airports in the area. Give me a few minutes.
He hailed a taxi and waited for one to stop. Ben? He whipped around to see Deirdre standing at the curb.
What are you doing here?
I had dinner at a pub, and the singer they had there was amazing. Time got away from me. Dee dug through her purse. Mind if we take the same taxi?
Where are you staying?
Ben held a hand up again. Hilton, not too far from the museum. Deirdre wouldn't meet his eyes. Ben opened the door to the taxi that had just pulled up.
Perfect. That's where I'm headed as well.
The cab was silent until they made it to the hotel. Ben paid for the fare, then followed Deirdre inside, unsure of what to say. Ben checked his phone again and cursed. He pushed the button on the elevator. What's going on? Deirdre asked.
It's fine.
He shook his head. He needed to stop lying to her.
Carlie said they just delayed her flight even more.
Deirdre raised an eyebrow. Why'd she tell you that and not me? Ben pushed the button again.
I diverted a flight. You don't think I can do something about it?
Good point. The elevator finally opened, and Ben pushed the button to his floor. It seemed to take an eternity to get to the 11th floor. He jogged down the hall to his room and was surprised when he heard someone behind him. He whipped around to see Deirdre standing there, looking sheepish.
Did you need something?
He held the door open for them. You don't think I'm just going to let you help my best friend without me, do you? Deirdre walked into the room and stopped. Whoa. 2 computers sat in the corner and papers were scattered all over one of the beds. Did you move in here or what? Ben walked past the beds and sat down.
I have to be ready for anything.
He tapped a few keys and pulled up all of the flights in the area. Most were already full, so they wouldn't work. Others were in the morning, which meant the flight they were waiting for would get there sooner. But what about... He typed in Newark's information, then dialed a number on his phone.
Hey, Al, do you still have your helicopter?
Ben sighed in relief as Carlie and Braden finally took off from Newark. The helicopter had barely made it in time, but they were now on their way to England. Well done, Ed. Thank you. Carlie's text was enough to tell him they were okay. He stood and went to the small sink to get a drink of water. Now it was time to sleep, so he could be up when they landed. Deirdre stood to leave. Thanks for getting the cab and for helping Carlie.
It's what I do.
Ben filled another glass with water and handed it to Dee.
I'm sorry for being so rude after our date. I shouldn't have ignored you.
Deirdre took the water and stared down at it. I understand why you did. I just wish you hadn't. But it's not even that. Ben tipped her chin up to look at him.
Do you think I would have kept this?
He gestured to the computers in the room. From you,
if I'd known you were Carlie's friend? I had no idea, and I wasn't sure I could trust you.
Deirdre met his eyes. And I'm sure it probably didn't help when I jumped out of the car that night.
No, not really. But then I probably should have figured out you were friends with Carlie right then. She would have done the same thing.
Yes, she would have. Deirdre drank the water and set the glass on the counter. Danny set up a few tours for the next few days for us before she had to cancel, so I'd better head to bed. Thanks for the water. Ben wanted to beg her to stay a little longer, but he just nodded.
Maybe I'll see you around, either here or when we get back to Arizona.
Sounds perfect to me. Deirdre smiled and left his room. Ben went back to the computer to watch the progress of the plane while he typed up the news story. He wanted to get it to his editor before morning. His mind drifted back to Dee and her smile as she left his room. Could he give up everything if she asked him? Maybe. But would she ever actually ask him to? Probably not. And the thought made him whistle as he put the final touches on the article and hit send. Now he just had to figure out how to run into her again before they left New York. Chapter 6. Dee held her hand up to knock for the 4th time, but couldn't seem to actually do it. If Ben didn't think she was a stalker before this, he would now. A couple walked past and gave her a strange look. They'd already been by, and she was still standing there. She grumbled to herself and finally knocked, cringing. What if he was at breakfast? Had she read his expression wrong last night? He had seemed just as interested as she was, but she wasn't always known for her judgment of character. She had a list of ex-boyfriends that proved that true. The door opened and a very tired-looking Ben stood there in a t-shirt and boxers. His eyes widened.
Sorry, one sec.
Dee could have sunk into the floor. She should have just texted. That would have at least given him time to get dressed before she came down. If he was even interested. She needed Danny or Carlie here to tell her to get a grip. But no, one was back in Arizona and the other was off in Europe somewhere. The door opened again, and Ben stood there dressed and his hair slicked back.
Sorry about that. It was a long night. What's up?
Well, Danny set all these things up for me to do, and I just didn't. Never mind. You can go back to bed. Dee turned, her face burning.
Wait.
Dee stopped and turned. Yeah?
What did you have in mind?
Ben slid his jacket on and slipped his wallet and key card in his pocket. Well, I had a couple of tours, a show tonight, and a list of restaurants I was supposed to try so I could allow her to live vicariously through me. Dee smirked at the words that Danny had used when she handed Dee the list. If you have newspaper stuff to do, I understand. Ben laughed.
She packed your day full, didn't she?
Yes. She's supposed to try to come this weekend, and she wants to know all the best places before she comes so we can have our day planned.
So I take it she's the reasonable one of the group?
He pushed the button to the elevator. Dee laughed. She says she's the tethers keeping Carlie and I from floating away. I'm just not so sure it's working for Carlie.
I'm thinking it'll take more than a tether to keep Carlie from floating away.
For sure. Dee stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the main floor. Did she land safely? Ben shook his head.
They've got another hour or so before they land. I probably won't hear for a bit after that, though.
Dee lifted an eyebrow. You mean you don't have the place bugged so you know the second they land?
Oh, I do. But I have a couple of people there waiting to make sure they're not intercepted.
Nice. Dee pulled out her phone. I assume you didn't have breakfast yet?
Well, I was just about to get up and order room service, but someone knocked on my door.
Ben grinned. Dee laughed. Sorry again. I should have realized not all people are morning people like me. There's a diner around here that Danny wants me to try out. Ready for some waffles and bacon?
You're speaking my language. Lead the way.
They left the hotel and turned right. She had to use the directions from her phone, but she got them there eventually. The diner had a vintage look to it, complete with a jukebox in the corner. Waitresses wore old-fashioned uniforms, and Dee knew immediately why Danny picked this place. It was right up her alley for the atmosphere. A teenager with a bored expression showed them to their booth, then went to help other customers. This place is amazing. Dee picked up the menu, and her stomach growled in anticipation. Hopefully Ben hadn't heard it.
Did Danny have recommendations for what to order, too?
Ben set his menu down and folded his hands on the table. Dee shook her head. We have completely different tastes in food, so she wouldn't dare. Mostly, she wanted to know how cute this place actually was.
Ah, So she goes for ambiance.
You got it.
Dee smiled up at the older woman who came to the table with a pad and paper.
What can I get you to? Benny?
The woman gasped. Ben stood and hugged the woman. Hey, Dorothy, how are you? Dee stared at the two of them in stunned silence. The mystery around Ben just kept getting bigger and bigger. Deirdre, this is Dorothy. She's a good friend of my mom's.
It's nice to meet you.
Dee smiled and took Dorothy's hand. Dorothy beamed.
It's nice to meet you, too. Oh, Benny, she's a beauty. You did well.
Ben's face burned, and Dee was pretty sure her face was the same shade of red. Thanks, Dorothy. We're
here as friends,
Dee added.
That's too bad. You two are so adorable together.
Dorothy patted Ben on the shoulder.
Now, what can I get you two?
Dee handed her the menu.
I'll have the waffles and bacon with some hot chocolate.
Sounds good to me. I'll have what she's having. Oh, and some pancakes and toast.
Dorothy chuckled. Still have the same appetite, I see. All right, I'll get this out to you.
Dee turned her attention to Ben when Dorothy was out of sight.
Any other surprises up your sleeves? Do you know the newspaper guy out there, too?
Phil? Nah, not really. He laughed when Dee's jaw dropped. I'm kidding. You just happened to pick the one diner my family used to come to all the time.
Did you grow up here?
Yep, not too far from here. You ran into me after I left my dad's apartment last night. Ben stared out the window. Dee frowned.
Was that a bad thing?
What? Ben looked over at her in surprise. Oh, no, it was actually a pretty good conversation. I just learned that I got this whole handler thing from him. I'd had no idea.
Whoa, I bet that blew your mind.
Ben smirked. You could say that. Dee pulled her phone out and took a couple of pictures of the area to send to Danny, then put it away again.
Maybe I should be asking you where we should visit.
No, this is your trip. I'm just along for the ride.
Fine, but maybe you can still help.
She took the list out of her pocket and set it in front of him.
These are all the places she wants to visit, but we have a day or two to see them. What do you recommend seeing first?
Ben ran his finger down the list. All the best places in the city, for sure. But you're missing a few I think you'd like. Dee leaned forward.
What do you have in mind?
Do you have a pen? She searched through her purse and pulled out a hotel pen.
Here you go.
Ben drew circles around a few of the places, crossed out others, and then added some to the bottom of the list. If she's only here for a couple of days, these are the places that will be easiest for her to check out. And if you want, we can check out the memorials I wrote down below. Dee took the list back and read through them. She'd heard of Ellis Island, of course. She and Danny had already gone the last time they were here. But a few of the Irish memorials were new to her.
So why these?
Dee stared down at Ben's handwriting, so crisp and clear, probably even better than her own. Well, you're the adventurous type, and you're studying anthropology, so I figured you'd want something that dealt with people from all over the world. Ben leaned back so Dorothy could set his food down. Thank you.
You're welcome, sweetie.
She set Dee's down, then went back to the kitchen.
Wow.
Dee's plate was overflowing with bacon, waffles, hash browns, and eggs.
I don't think I'll be needing lunch or dinner today.
Ben chuckled. I should have warned you about that. Dee took a bite of waffle, and it almost melted in her mouth. She didn't care what else they did for the rest of the trip. She had to come back here for these waffles. Dee groaned as they stood and left the diner.
I was wrong. I won't need to eat for the rest of the trip.
Ben flagged down a cab. I'd forgotten just how much I loved that food. I'm so glad Danny suggested it.
Why didn't you tell me you knew the owner when we walked in?
I figured she'd have sold it years ago. Ben gave the address to the driver and leaned back in his seat. He shook his head. This trip has been weird, to tell you the truth.
What do you mean?
Ben ticked off reasons on his fingers. First, I see you. Then, I run into a hot dog vendor that I used to bug on my way to and from school. Then, I found out my dad used to be in the same business I am and didn't bother to tell me. And now, Dorothy. It's almost like... Dee sat up.
What about the vendor guy and Dorothy? Any chance they're in on the business too?
Nah, it's all too coincidental. We just happened to be in the right neighborhood.
You sure about that? Dee's heart thumped in her chest. You're sure they're not checking up on you? Ben frowned.
I was until you mentioned that.
He pulled out a sheet of paper and scanned the names, then shook his head.
They're not listed in Dad's contacts.
So, what if he didn't want you to know? Dee's mind spun with everything that had happened since she left the museum the night before. Things weren't adding up right. Ben glanced out the back window.
No one is following us, so that's a relief.
How would you know? The cars are all packed in together. Dee scanned the cars, looking for anything out of the ordinary. Everything seemed fine. People selling their wares, others walking quickly to get wherever they're going, tourists taking pictures. Wait, do you know that person? Ben leaned over Dee to see what she was pointing at, but by that time the person had turned to something else.
I don't think so. Why?
I swear that lady was taking pictures of our taxi. Dee watched a blonde woman with her camera until she was out of sight. She was all too aware of how close Ben was sitting next to her, and she couldn't breathe. Of course, that probably had something to do with the extra plate of pancakes Dorothy had brought out.
I don't see anything.
Ben sent a quick text.
I asked my dad just in case, but it's probably nothing.
Dee wasn't so sure. The lady was pretty focused right on their taxi. Why would someone come after you? Ben's eyes flicked up to the taxi driver, then back to Dee, but didn't say anything.
They wouldn't. Oh, hey, I think we're here.
Great. Dee climbed out of the taxi while Ben paid the driver. A memorial spread out in front of them. Tourists walked around the grounds, and Dee could hear tour guides talking loudly in several different areas of the property. Ben took her arm and pulled her to the side. When they stopped, he stood close to her and leaned in. His cheek brushed hers, sending a rush of emotions through her. His lips tickled her ear as he spoke.
I don't know why, but you're right about the fact that something is going on. The taxi driver was a little too interested in what we were talking about. Plus, look what my dad sent me.
His hand brushed hers to hand off the phone. Dee could barely breathe as she took the phone and looked down, breaking contact from him. Man, he smelled good. She had to force herself to focus on the message his dad had sent.
No one should know you're here. Stay out of sight and leave as soon as possible. And I'd keep a close eye on Carlie.
A spike of fear ran through Dee. What does he mean? Is Carlie in danger?
She's always in danger. Don't worry. I'll watch out for her. Now, we're going to walk through and pretend like nothing is wrong. We're here to see the Irish Hunger Museum. That's it.
Ben looked down into her eyes and Dee nearly melted.
You okay with that?
Dee couldn't breathe or speak, so she simply nodded. If he had told her they were going to fly to the moon, she would have agreed. Ben stepped away and smiled.
Ready to see my roots?
You're Irish?
Yep. Well, half. My dad is Irish. His family left Ireland during the famine and never went back. Every once in a while I think of moving there, but I haven't taken the plunge yet.
He put a hand on the small of Dee's back and led her over to a path.
They have stones from every county among the landscaping. This is where my family is from.
Dee bent down to take a picture of the Cork County stone. This was definitely somewhere she needed to bring Danny. She'd go crazy. As she stood, she caught the eye of another tourist who quickly turned away. Dee forced herself to stay calm. It was fine. There were tons of tourists walking around, millions of people in the city. Catching the eye of one of them was bound to happen, right? She tugged on Ben's hand. Hey, can you actually go into the cottage?
Sure.
Ben stared down at her but didn't say anything as they walked through the ruins of the old cottage. They got to a small alcove and he leaned in.
Everything okay?
Yeah, why?
You're cutting off the circulation to my fingers.
He chuckled. Dee dropped his hand. Sorry about that. I'm just so, I don't know, on edge. Can we go somewhere else?
Just follow my lead.
He put an arm around her and they walked away from the memorial. in and out of crowds, through alleyways and down into the subway before going back up again at the next stop. "Is this how you travel through every city?" Dee asked as they climbed onto another train. He shrugged.
Not really. It was a little crazy when Carlie went to get the necklace because we had a mole in the group that kept giving away our location, including your apartment. But usually, I just chill in my house and wait for something exciting to happen. This is actually pretty nice for a change. Plus, I have good company with me, so what else do I need?
Dee ducked her head so he wouldn't see her blushing. She had to admit that, as freaked out as she was, the day had been pretty nice. "So what do we do next?"
Well, first we need to find our way back to the hotel. My stuff is there and I need to check on Carlie. They landed and they got to their rental, but I haven't heard anything since.
He smiled, but his eyes were troubled. "If she's in trouble again..." Ben handed her his phone.
According to this, she was fine. Hopefully she's just scoping out the place and can't talk. We'll find out as soon as we get back.
The texts were short, but they were definitely Carlie. She handed him back his phone and took her own out. "I'd better hear things are fine very soon, or you're in big trouble." Ben raised his eyebrows.
You think she'll reply to that?
"Probably not, but I have to try something. I don't like that she just disappears for weeks at a time."
I don't either.
Ben climbed off the subway and Dee followed him.
Keep an eye out. We won't enter the hotel until we know for sure no one is following us.
Dee didn't have to be told twice. She was already watching everyone around them, checking for anything suspicious. No one was meeting her eyes, so that was a bonus. "I think we're good." Ben nodded, and they separated to enter the hotel at different times. Dee forced herself to breathe calmly and walk slowly. No need to let anyone know she was nervous. Relief flowed over her as she stepped into the hotel. Now, to make it to her room. No one followed her onto the elevator, and the hallways were clear except for a family who carried several shopping bags amongst them. The key card clicked the lock, and she carefully opened the door, breathing a sigh of relief when everything looked fine inside. She closed the door quietly and crept through the room, checking the closets and bathroom to make sure no one was there. Then opened the curtains to check the balcony. All clear. She flopped onto the bed and finally allowed herself to relax. Her head pounded from the pent-up fear that she'd held on to all day. Maybe she should go home. But what if whoever was behind this followed her back home? She couldn't let that happen. She pulled out the phone and dialed Danny's number. "Hey, are you homesick yet?" Danny's cheerful voice washed over Dee. "Don't count on it. Did you get all the photos I texted you?" Danny huffed. "Yes. I can't believe you're there and I'm stuck here. Thank you for your purchase." Dee grinned into the phone. How Danny hadn't been fired from her job was beyond Dee. She was on her phone while helping customers all the time. Interruptions like this were just part of being friends with Danny. "Did I catch you at a bad time?" "Nope. You should see what I just sold someone. It was some old desk with a bunch of hidden compartments in it. I somehow convinced them it belonged to Thomas Jefferson." Dee laughed. "I can't believe they bought that." "Hey, it could have been." Danny greeted another customer. "Hey, have you heard from Carlie? I told her to pick me up some chocolate while she's in Europe, but she hasn't replied." "No, I haven't. And I'm a little worried. But listen, remember the guy I went out with there, Ben?" "The creeper? Yeah, why? That's $14.95. Dee closed her eyes and could feel his cheek against hers. The thought sent another wave of giddiness through her. "He's here." "Wait, what? Why didn't you call me the second you saw him?" "That's not all. He's Carlie's handler." Dee waited for Danny's response, but there was just silence on the other side. Dee checked her phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Danny? Are you still there?" Danny's voice was muffled when she finally spoke again. "Dee, don't you think that's a little too convenient? Ben comes into your life and suddenly Carlie is missing?" The thought had crossed her mind, but there had been genuine surprise when they'd all run into each other at the exhibit the night before. I can see where you'd feel that way, but Carlie admitted herself that he was Ed. He saved us, remember? I thought his name was Ben. It is. Ed's his handler name.
Danny snorted. He could have used any name for a handler name and he chose Ed?
I guess so. We've spent most of the day together and he's amazing.
Uh-huh. Listen, I'm getting the evil eye from my boss, so I'd better go. Tonight, you're spilling everything, got it? Dee grinned.
Got it. How about you don't take any more calls at work for the day?
Yeah, right. At least some things in her life were still normal. Danny had reacted exactly like Dee had predicted. Suspicious and excited at the same time. Now, if Dee could just figure out how she felt about the whole thing. Chapter 7. Ben paced his room while he waited for his computer to warm up. Carlie still hadn't checked in, and he'd put Dee in danger as well. This was not one of his better days. He jumped and went for the chair as soon as the screen appeared. Maps of England, stats for Braden and Carlie, and the location of the emerald appeared on the screen. The phone he had the tracker on sat at the house where they were supposed to be staying. He checked his watch. Only 9 o'clock there, so they shouldn't be asleep. He dialed their number, but it went to voicemail. Hey, I'm checking to make sure everything is okay. Please get back to me ASAP. The pulsing light on the screen did nothing to calm his nerves. Something was up. He should have insisted on the hotel instead of the rental. At least the hotel would have surveillance in the hallways he could watch. His phone buzzed, and he grabbed it. Nothing but a request for a story from the newspaper. He sighed and typed back a response. Talking about the local baseball game was not what he wanted to be doing, but he didn't have much of a choice. Ben pulled up the game on his phone and listened while he checked stoplights in the general area of the rental in London. It was harder to break through the firewalls than it was here, but soon he was able to scan through them. It took a bit to find the right time frame. Cars drove back and forth past the small apartment while Ben took notes of the game. He hated doing work for both jobs at once, but it kept his mind from wandering. There. He tuned out the game and rewound the tape back. Carlie and Braden pulled over and climbed out, then got their bags from the trunk. They hurried inside and the door closed behind them. Ben checked the time. It was right around when they'd planned to be there. Home run! Look at that ball fly! The announcers went back and forth on the spectacular catch while Ben scrambled to pause the video and write down who had been batting. Okay, so this time it was going to be a little more difficult for him to do both. His team just had to improve this year. He hit record on his second phone so he could listen to the game later and went back to the videos. Nothing happened for a few hours before there was more activity. A van pulled up to the curb and a man got out. Ben zoomed in. It was the guard they'd used in Egypt. He was supposed to be there as their security. Why wasn't he there already? Ed made a note to check on that and then went back to watching. Nothing. There had been no change through all the footage that Ben had watched. No one going in, no one going out. The monitor still showed that Carlie was in her apartment, but it didn't make sense. She knew others were after the emerald. Ben picked up the notebook with the notes for the game and started the recording. He knew the final results, but he needed details before he sent the story off to his editor. The knock on the door sent his senses into overdrive. He pulled out a taser and crept over to the door. When he saw Deirdre standing there, he smiled and slipped the taser into his back pocket as he opened the door. Hey, I figured you'd be at one of your shows by now. He opened the door wider so she could come inside. She held up a couple of bags.
Figured you were hungry, so I grabbed some chicken from one of the places on Danny's list.
That smells amazing. He moved some books off the table so she could set down the food. Perfect timing. You can listen to the baseball game with me.
Oh, who's playing? She pulled out the smaller bags of chicken and set them on the table, then pulled drinks out of the other bag. Ben turned on the recording.
It's for the paper, so it's our local team. From what I paid attention to, it was a pretty close game.
Deirdre pulled out 2 plates. I forgot they were still playing. Everything else kind of disappears the second school ends.
I get that.
Ben took a couple of pieces of chicken. It was crispy and the flavors were perfect.
Danny knows how to choose her restaurants.
She really does. That's why I drag her along with me most of the time. Dee wiped her hands on a napkin and pulled out another small container. I hope you're hungry because they also sent vegetables and mashed potatoes. Oh, and some rolls, too. Ben helped her serve the other dishes.
Starving. It's amazing how much staring at a screen can take out of you.
Any news? Ben shook his head.
No. I saw them get out of the car, but then nothing happens. I made it through the first several hours, but I had to stop long enough to get this story to the editor.
Want me to help?
I thought you had touring to do.
She shrugged. I decided it wasn't fun going out myself. Besides, I'd had enough of people watching us earlier. I figured staying in was better and safer.
Good point.
Ben went over to his computer and loaded up another set of videos.
If you want to watch these tapes, I can write the story, unless you're dying to write the article.
Deirdre shook her head. I don't think you'd want me to do that. I'll watch. Once they were done eating, Deirdre dumped the bags and plates into the garbage and washed her hands in the bathroom. Okay, so what am I looking for? Ben bent down close to her and pointed at the apartment.
That's where they're located. I need to know if anyone comes or goes. That van right there is their security, but he showed up after they did. That has me worried. But right now I just want to know where Carlie is.
Got it. Deirdre stared at the screen and Ben went back over to the table to listen to the game. Ben took notes and wrote up his article while Deirdre sat there staring at the screen. He shook his head, wondering how he'd managed to find someone who was perfectly okay with his lifestyle. Even when she sat there spinning in the office chair, she was beautiful. She wore sweats and had her hair pulled up, but it worked for her just as much as the gown had the night before. Deirdre suddenly gasped. Hey, I think I found something.
Really?
He tipped over his chair in his haste to get over to the computer.
Finally!
Deirdre had paused to show Carlie, Braden, and the security guard standing at the front door. She continued playing it as soon as he sat down. The 3 of them walked down the steps, then climbed into the van the security guy had brought. Ben checked the time. It was past midnight there. He pulled out the tapes for the other cameras in the area and watched the van continue down the street. But the monitor he'd given Carlie had stayed at the hotel. Ben cursed. There was no knowing where they'd gone if she didn't have that with her. Does this mean they're on the way to get the emerald? Deirdre asked. That's good, right? Ben shook his head.
She wouldn't have gone in without me watching them every step of the way.
Deirdre leaned closer. Wait. Look. An hour had passed on the camera when the van had pulled up next to the apartment again. But this time, only the security guy got out. Another car pulled up and 3 others got out and ran inside. Who are they? Deirdre asked.
I don't know, but I need to find out. Do you have a laptop?
Deirdre held up her smartphone. No, but I have this. Why?
Because you're about to become a sports writer. Take those notes and write them into the computer. The email address you need is already typed in, so it should go pretty fast.
I can't write.
Yes, you can. You've written research papers. It's no different. Just take my notes and fill in some of the blanks.
Ben took her hand.
I need you to do this for our friend. Got it?
Deirdre pulled up the Notes app on her phone and started typing. Ben turned back to the computer and hacked into any and all cameras he could find. At this point, he just hoped one of them would pick up the phone that was bugged and take it with them. Not that there was much hope that they would. They'd be looking for laptops and notes. Ben pulled up the details that Carlie had sent him and went through the notes, trying to find anything that would indicate where they were going. Several crime bosses were supposed to meet to work out the terms of the deal, which meant they couldn't meet where the police would find them. How Braden found this out was beyond Ben. They had taken down Braden's company when they tried to steal back the necklace from Carlie. There were a few numbers that looked like street numbers along with scribbled names, but nothing stuck out to him. He'd have to go the old-fashioned route. Each of the other numbers on the paper had several different options it could be. It was time to combine them. I'm done. Deirdre handed Ben her phone. Not sure if it's up to your standards, but it's done. Ben scanned through the article.
What do you mean you can't write? This is perfect. There are a couple of word choices I'll have to change, but otherwise it's exactly what I needed. Trade me for a sec. The computer is running through variations, so just watch to see if anything comes up.
Deirdre nodded and watched the screen while Ben tweaked the article. There wasn't much that needed to be fixed, so he was done within minutes and then sent it off. Hopefully, that was the last assignment the paper had for him so he could focus on his other job.
Find anything yet?
Ben pulled his chair up next to Deirdre's. A few things. I double-checked these addresses and most of them are abandoned. This one is owned by a fairly wealthy businessman, and this one is right in the center of London.
Wow.
Ben blinked.
I'm impressed. Okay, let's try these 2 factories first. The man's house is too obvious, and the building in town would be hard to get in and out of without suspicion.
He took one factory while Deirdre took the other. It was old and broken down, both inside and out. Not the best meeting place. He leaned closer to Deirdre, and her research seemed about the same.
Okay, so not the factories. Looks like these guys are trying something a little different.
Ben sighed.
I wish Carlie had gone over details before she left.
Well, what did she tell you? Deirdre leaned closer to look through his papers. Ben breathed in her shampoo.
Well, she gave me the details, but I had no time to stake anything out before she took off. Usually we have a way to get there first, except for when they took off to Thailand, but even then, she kept in contact with me.
We didn't even get that. Deirdre took the papers from Ben and looked through them. Wait, look. She typed in an address and pulled up the mansion she'd come up with before. This was in her notes. You sure they wouldn't go there? Ben searched the man's name in arrest records and several files came up. Anything from embezzling to hiring hitmen.
I think you're right, but that doesn't help us figure out where Carlie is.
I can almost guarantee she's there somewhere getting into trouble. Deirdre stretched. I hate to break up the party, but I am exhausted. Text me if anything happens. Ben felt a stab of disappointment.
Okay, just make sure you're careful. Want me to walk you down?
Nah, I'm good. Deirdre stood. You should get some sleep too. You won't be any help if you're a zombie.
I'll sleep when I figure out where she is.
Ben waved and turned back to the computer. Something was off, and he couldn't figure out what it was. He texted his dad to see if he'd heard of anything going on, then kept going through the videos. The old videos were on one monitor while the current traffic cameras were going on another. But he had to be missing something somewhere. And after the whole problem with Frank betraying all of them, Ben wanted to be extra careful. His phone rang with an unknown number. He hesitated before answering it.
Hello?
What business do you have with Carl Edmonds? It was Dad, and he seemed out of breath.
Carlie has him in her notes. Why? I mean, besides the multiple arrests and warrants.
Dad laughed.
Those are the only crimes they got him for. He takes being a crime boss to a whole new level. If she's wrapped into something with him, Carlie's in big trouble. And that would explain the movement here as well. Get out. They're closing in if they haven't already taken over the hotel where you're staying. And I don't like it even a little bit.
Ben stared at the monitors. It would take a while to get everything packed up.
Got it. If you have any contacts in the area, I could use some help getting stuff out of here. Already on it. Code word is butterfly. They'll bring your stuff to the family safe house and I'll ship it when you're safe. Go.
The line went dead. He didn't have to be told twice. Dad hadn't contacted him for years, and Ben wasn't about to ignore the warning. He grabbed his clothes, wallet, and gun and shoved them in a bag. He'd just emptied the safe when someone knocked on the door. 3 large men stood in the hall. The middle guy held up a sign that said Butterfly. As soon as he showed it, the paper disintegrated. Ben opened the door.
Be careful with my stuff. I spent my life savings on those screens.
He had to jump out of the way as they walked through. One stopped and turned.
I believe your father told you to be gone. Grab your girl and get out.
Ben nodded once and ran for the elevator. He felt for his gun as the door opened to another group of men. These didn't seem quite so friendly. It was too late. He darted down the hallway and burst through the stair doorway. He just hoped Deirdre was still okay. Chapter 8. Dee dried her hair with a towel and changed into a pair of pajamas. It had been a long day, and while she'd enjoyed doing detective work with Ben, she was exhausted. She dropped onto her bed and turned on the TV. Her phone buzzed. "Hey, I got the day off tomorrow. I'm thinking of leaving on the first flight out of here. Ready to party?" Dee grinned and responded, "Let's do it. Perfect. I'll text you with flight details as soon as I have them." "Sounds great." Dee set her phone down and turned off the lamp. If she was going to keep up with Danny, she needed sleep right now. She'd almost drifted off when someone pounded on the door. Dee's heart beat hard in her chest. Did she answer the door or call the police? But then if they were going to break in, they wouldn't have been loud, right? She stood and grabbed her mace. Ben stood there breathing hard. She'd barely turned the knob when he burst into the room and latched the door behind him. "Grab your stuff, all of it. We gotta go." Ben ran to the window and threw open the curtains. He opened the door and leaned over the balcony. He turned back and helped her shove clothes into her bags. "They found us, and my dad said Carlie is in over her head. You're going home on the next flight. We already have a ticket for you."
Whoa, wait. And hey, careful with that dryer. It wasn't cheap.
She grabbed it from him and set it among her socks. Ben took her by the shoulders. "There are men in the hotel right now ready to kill both of us if we don't get out of here. Now."
Why do they want me?
Dee glared.
"Me? Your best friend? An emerald?"
He zipped up the bag and handed it to her.
"My dad has your room number. He'll come and get the rest of your stuff. Think you can climb down the side of the wall?"
No. We're like 80 feet off the ground right now, in the middle of New York. You don't think...
Dee's words were cut off by more pounding on the door.
"Don't answer it. Come on."
Ben grabbed her by the hand and pulled her to the balcony.
"Hold on tight."
Before Dee could ask why, Ben wrapped his arms around her waist and tipped her over the edge. She screamed until the wings of the jetpack Ben wore popped out and the wind whipped away her breath. Shots rang out behind them from the direction of the hotel. They landed on a roof across the street, and Dee leaned over to try to catch her breath.
What was that about?
"We don't have time. I'm sorry. Let's go to the airport and then I'll tell you."
A helicopter came around the corner and Ben ran for the stairs. They barely made it inside before shots hit the door. They raced down the steps and through someone's apartment to get to the fire escape.
"Get in."
Ben opened the door to a black van and waited for Dee to climb in before he got inside. The driver gunned the engine, and Dee had to hold on tight so she wouldn't get thrown around inside.
Is someone going to tell me what's going on?
Dee ran her fingers through her hair, trying to get the tangles out.
"Problem is, you know as much as I do. The Carl guy you looked up is apparently worse than we thought. My dad made me get out, and it was barely on time."
Dee rubbed her forehead, trying to concentrate.
And you're sending me home because...
"So you're out of danger."
I won't be out of danger there. We both know that. I'm coming with you.
Dee jerked back. That was the last thing she'd expected to say, but she knew she meant it. Ben laughed.
No, you're not."
Look, I'm no safer at home than I am here, and Carlie is my best friend. I can't just let her be out there in trouble and pretend like everything is okay. Why do you think I've spent all the time staring at the computer?
It was Ben's turn to jerk back.
"Well, I guess I thought it was because you wanted to spend time with me."
"That's part of it." Dee backpedaled.
I loved spending time with you, but I'm sorry. My best friend is my top priority.
Ben shook his head.
"I'm sorry. I can't let you do that."
They pulled up to the airport and climbed out. Ben escorted Dee to her gate and waited for her to get onto the plane. She stopped at the entrance to the plane and counted to 10 before doubling back. She wasn't going home. Ben was no longer by the gate, so she made her way through the crowd back into the airport. She stopped in front of the computers to find the right flight and cursed. The only flight to England would leave in half an hour, so she had to act fast. She found a gift shop and grabbed some clothes and a bag off the shelf and paid for them before heading for the restroom. She grimaced at the clothes, but she had to make sure Ben wouldn't recognize her. The hoodie that covered her hair and tacky sweatpants with New York City across the backside were something she would never wear. Of course, Ben might not know that, but as long as she could get on the plane, it didn't matter. Dee shoved her old clothes in the bag and walked casually through the airport. Her heart pounded, fear and a little excitement coursing through her. She had always wanted to do what Carlie did, but she never expected to actually do it. And yet, here she was. She finally found the right gate for the flight and searched for Ben. It wouldn't do any good to go through all this if she was caught before she got on the plane. Ben stood to the side of the gate, typing on his laptop, but Dee knew he was keeping an eye out on everything around him. Whoever had been chasing them couldn't have been too far behind, so the wait to board had to be driving him crazy. Dee backtracked to the ticket counter. "Hi, I need a ticket to England." The woman frowned. "You realize this flight is ready to board?" "Yes, sorry. How'd you get in here without a ticket?" The woman reached for the phone. "I have a ticket back to Arizona, and I was going to get on it, but I couldn't do it. I decided to surprise my boyfriend in England for his birthday. I can't bear to go another day without seeing him." Dee gushed. She hated lying, but by the smile on the woman's face, she'd said the right thing. "Let's see what we can do." She stared down at the computer screen before looking up at Dee. "It seems that the only spots available are in first class. Would that work?" "I don't care. I'll take it." She handed over her passport and a credit card. It would take all of her balance, but she'd just make Carlie pay her back when she was out of danger. "Thank you. Good luck with your boyfriend, and I suggest you don't do this again." "Thanks." Dee grabbed her bag and ran for the gate. She slowed and went on alert, making sure nothing seemed suspicious. Well, besides the way she was acting. She needed to calm down before someone wondered about her. Getting the last-minute tickets had already made the lady wonder about her. The first-class passengers were boarding by the time Dee got back to the gate. Ben was on the phone talking, so she slipped past him and handed the ticket and her passport to the agent. His eyes flicked between the passport and her face a few times before he finally scanned the ticket and gestured for her to go on.
Enjoy your flight.
"Thank you." She hoped her name hadn't been flagged, but there was no time to worry about that. The line moved slowly onto the plane as people found their seats. Dee couldn't help but come up with all kinds of crazy scenarios while she waited. Ben would find her and make her leave. The bad guys would be on the plane looking for her and Ben. It was a relief when she finally got to her seat without anything bad happening. She pulled out the magazine she'd bought to hide her face and took deep breaths to calm down.
You know that's the worst disguise ever, right?
Ben sat next to Dee. Dee cursed and set the magazine on her lap. "You let me go through all of that, and you knew what I was doing the whole time?"
No, although I was a little suspicious. You gave up and went on your flight a little too easily. When I boarded and saw the hoodie and the magazine being held up in the air, I figured it was you. Most people don't read magazines that way.
He took it from her.
Then I just had to see your eyes as you peeked up over it to know I was right.
"You know I couldn't just let you go." Dee pulled her hoodie off and fixed her hair for the millionth time that day. "You said earlier that I know as much as you do about the case. I can help figure out where she is because I've known her for as long as you have. Besides, this way Danny stays out of trouble. If I go back, who knows what could happen?"
Ben sighed. I figured you'd say that. Just look through the notes I emailed you and get up to speed on how things work.
"Ooh, will it self-destruct?"
Nope, unless you delete it, but I suggest you read it first.
Ben put a seatbelt on as the pre-flight instructions began. Dee checked her phone and stopped. "Wait, how do you know my email address?"
You really want to know?
"Nope." Dee smiled as she opened the email. She told herself it was because she finally got to be part of the excitement, but in truth, seeing his name in her email box made her giddy. She waved it off and read through it. Everything was pretty straightforward. Where to go when they were separated, when to abort, what to do if the partner was killed.
Wait, I don't like this last one.
Dee smiled apologetically at the stewardess who stood next to them. It happens. Ben took her hand. I'm not going to let it happen this time. I promise. Dee's breath caught in her throat as waves of excitement flowed from her hand. It was annoying how excited she was getting over the smallest things, but the feel of his hand holding hers had sent her heart thumping. I'm going to hold you to that. Dee settled into her seat. It was going to be a long flight, but at least the seats were comfortable. And even better, Ben hadn't let go of her hand. Dee slowly turned in a circle, taking in as much of the sights of London as she could in the few moments she had while Ben got their rental car. She was here, in England, land of awesome accents, hilarious comedy, and the Beatles. She was in heaven. Ready to go? Ben jingled the keys next to her. Sure.
Give me one more second.
Dee did a quick panoramic picture with her phone, then turned to Ben.
Let's do this.
Ben chuckled. There will be plenty of time to tour London later. First, we have to save Carlie and Braden.
Right. So where do we start?
Their apartment. I want to see inside, try to get a feel of what might have happened. Dee nodded.
Good idea. And then we'll go get them?
Depends on what we find out at the apartment. Ben gestured toward a sleek black car. Traffic was crazy, and Dee couldn't get over the fact that they were driving on the opposite side of the road. It was probably good that Ben was driving. She took as many pictures as possible as they drove over the Tower Bridge.
Do you think she's okay?
Dee leaned over Ben to get a picture of the Tower of London while they were stopped. The more she could distract herself, the less she panicked. I hope so. Ben continued down the road and stopped a few blocks later. They pulled up in front of a building and Dee recognized it immediately from the video surveillance they'd watched. Was that just yesterday? The same van sat at the curb, but there seemed to be no activity. Ben pulled out his laptop and typed in his password, then grabbed another device from the back seat. He hooked them up and pointed it toward the apartment. Images came up on the screen, showing 4 people sitting at a table.
Whoa, how'd you get your hands on one of those?
Ben moved the camera to point toward the upper floor. It's amazing what you can find on the black market, or in the classifieds.
You must look at different classifieds than what I've seen.
Dee leaned in.
Too bad we can't tell who it is.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's not Carlie or Braden. The figures are too big. He frowned. There are no other bodies in here. Not sure what these guys are doing here, but they're not guarding Carlie. Dee tapped her fingers on the car door.
So, if they don't have them there, they must be waiting for Carlie to come back?
Probably. Ben shook his head. AJ was one of my guys. Frank must have gotten to him, which means that my team is diminishing by the minute.
Who does Frank work for?
We don't know yet. Ben set the camera in its bag and started the car. Dee put her seatbelt back on, expecting to go find a hotel. But Ben drove around the block and parked behind the apartments across the street from Carlie's apartment. This is where we're staying? It's the easiest way to watch the apartment without having to sit in our car the whole time. Ben went to the trunk and pulled out his bags, then headed up the steps. Dee only had her purse and the outfit she'd worn to the airport, so she just shut the car door and followed him into the apartment. It was clean and modestly furnished with a modern decor. Ben had already started setting up his surveillance equipment, so Dee took the time to check out the house. There was an upstairs with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom in each of the rooms. On the way back downstairs, she paused. These were modern pictures of a family. She went back upstairs and checked the rooms again. Toys sat in the closet of the smaller room. Dee sighed and went to find Ben.
This wasn't a rental, was it?
They were more than happy to let us borrow the house for a few days while they're at the French Riviera. All expenses paid. Dee studied the pictures on the wall in the living room. More of the family. 2 kids, young.
Do you just kick people out all the time?
We didn't kick them out. We just offered them the vacation. They were more than happy to drop the kids off with their grandparents and head off on vacation. Ben opened the kitchen curtains. Now,
Are you going to sit there and criticize me, or are you going to help?
What do I do? Dee glanced out the window. The van blocked part of the view, but they could see the windows at least. Ben opened his wallet and pulled out a credit card.
I know I'm pulling the "you're a woman so you know how to shop" thing, but, well, that's actually the case. I need a pinstripe suit and fedora, and you need something that matches the style. Think 1920s. Then make sure you have enough other clothes to last a week or so. Maybe something for Carlie if you know her size.
Dee blinked. You want me to shop in England?
Sorry,
Are you kidding? I'm out of here. Oh, do you know your size? Ben shook his head.
Large? Maybe extra large?
Dee rolled her eyes and walked up behind him, then pulled the back of his shirt down to check the size of his dress shirt. Her finger rubbed against his neck, and she felt him shiver. She laid the shirt flat. When he turned to face her, his eyes were just inches from hers. Her breath caught as she stared up at him. His eyes dropped to her lips as he leaned forward. He pulled away at the last second, clearing his throat. Disappointment welled up inside her, and she grabbed her purse and hoodie. I'll be back.
Wait.
But the door slammed behind her before she heard what he was going to say. She was as angry with herself as she was with him. They were here to save Carlie, not go on some romantic getaway. But what if both of those things could happen? Dee sighed. No use worrying about that right now. She pulled up the maps on her phone and headed for Piccadilly Circus. It didn't occur to her to ask the limit on the card until she stood in the center of one of the shops. She grabbed some dresses, shirts, and pants and went to the dressing room. She'd deal with that once she found clothes to wear. When Dee jumped on the plane to England, this was the last thing she thought she'd be doing. She stared at the red dress she wore. It accented her curves perfectly and matched the style that Ben had been hoping for. Why they had to go with 1920s was another thing she'd neglected to ask about. After finding some casual clothes to wear back to the apartment, she changed back into the sweats she bought in New York and searched for a suit for Ben. Next was the shoe store where she found some killer heels that she couldn't wait to show Danny. In fact, she pulled out her phone and took a picture to send it, but it wouldn't go. Right, she was in England. The picture would have to wait until she got back to the apartment and onto Wi-Fi. By the time Dee was done shopping, she was ready for the mission. Well, maybe not, but at least she looked the part. Now it was time to find out what the next phase was. Chapter 9. Ben took a drink of water, keeping his eyes on the apartment across the street. He could rely on the cameras, but he wanted to make sure he didn't miss anything. Deirdre had been gone for a couple of hours now, and if she wasn't back soon, he'd need to go find her. The look on her face when he handed her the card had been priceless. It was a good thing she was excited. He hated picking out the clothes for missions because he could never get the sizes right. The traffic was light in the area, which meant it was easy to track. So when the same car went by 3 times, Ben knew something was up. He took several pictures of the plates to make sure he got the number, then ran it through the computer. It wasn't too surprising to find that they weren't registered to anyone, but that made his job a little tougher. A key rattled in the lock before someone knocked on the back door. Ben hurried to answer and found Deirdre standing on the step with several bags in her arms. Sorry, my key didn't work. Deirdre pushed her way through the door and set the bags on the table. Anything happen while I was gone?
The same car has been circling, but otherwise nothing.
Ben pulled a suit out of a bag and held it out.
Wow.
Awesome, right? There was this cool shop full of them. Deirdre picked up her bags. I'll get these put away.
Change into something nicer. We're actually going out. I have some contacts I want to try to talk to.
Ben took his own bag and followed her up the stairs. He took the smaller room and let her have the master suite. He'd saved the pinstripe suit for the meeting with the crime boss. For now, he needed something he could run in if it came to needing a quick escape. The other suit she'd grabbed would do the trick. He changed and straightened the tie. It was almost a perfect fit, although the legs needed to be shortened just a little. He slicked his hair back and shoved his phone, wallet, and a small gun into his pocket. Ben knocked on Deirdre's door.
You ready? I need to get to the restaurant.
Deirdre opened the door and Ben's eyes widened. She was dressed in a black dress suit and heels. Her hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her makeup accented her green eyes perfectly.
Wow, you look nice. Perfect for the meeting.
Ben checked his watch.
The car should be here now.
A limo sat outside the back door waiting for them. Ben made sure the door was locked and the alarm system was on, then joined Deirdre in the car. He sat next to her and waved for the limo to drive.
These people we're meeting are friends of my dad. They were collecting intel and let my dad know they saw something today. It could be a trap. I've lost a few people to the other side already, and I don't know about these people.
Deirdre nodded. So be ready to run?
If they even give us a chance.
Ben grimaced. Carlie would kill him for this. He reached under the seat and found the small handgun he'd asked for.
Know how to shoot one of these?
She took the gun and cocked it. I've learned a little. After our apartment was broken into last year, I decided it was time I owned one, but then the actual buying never happened.
You've had training?
I went to the gun range a few times. Deirdre set the gun inside her purse. Anything else?
Yes. Don't get hit or Carlie will have my neck.
Deirdre laughed. She really would. They pulled up in front of a restaurant and climbed out. Ben helped her out of the car and let go. He needed to keep this professional or he'd lose it. Her smile and the way she fit into that dress suit was making him lose resolve fast.
Hi, we're here to meet our party, the Blacks.
Ben handed the maitre d' $100 bill. The man took the cash and walked them back to a table near the back. 2 men and a woman sat at the table speaking quietly. They looked up as Ben and Deirdre approached.
Mr. Black.
Ben held out a hand. The shorter of the 2 men stood and shook Ben's hand. You must be Ed. And this is... His eyes ran up and down her suit, and Ben felt the overwhelming need to punch him. She didn't deserve the look he gave her.
My partner. This is Samantha. It's a pleasure to meet you. My father has told me so much about you.
They didn't have to know that he'd only actually talked to his dad a few days before and never about these people. Mr. Black studied him before nodding.
Your father is a good man. I haven't heard from him in years, so imagine my surprise when you suddenly called me out of nowhere.
Ben leaned forward.
Look, I only recently received the list of his contacts, and I hadn't planned to contact any of you, but my friends are in danger. We believe they had business with Carl Edmonds, and they haven't been seen since the first night they were here.
The woman gasped. What would they want with him?
My friends love to collect artifacts and other priceless items. Carl is in possession of an emerald that was part of an old shipwreck. The goal was to get it back and reunite it with the rest of the items from the wreck.
For the first time since Ben and Deirdre sat down, Mr. Black seemed to relax.
We know of this emerald, and we also know that your friends' lives are at stake if Carl got a hold of them. It may already be too late.
Deirdre tensed next to Ben. He took her hand to comfort her. She couldn't lose it right now. Ben needed to get her out of there. But first, they needed some kind of reassurance.
Has there been any movement in the Edmonds Manor over the last few days?
The 3 of them exchanged glances before Mr. Black responded.
There was a van that was seen coming and going over the last 2 days, but it was presumed to be a part of the preparation for the ball being held there later this week. Ball?
It was Ben's turn to tense up. Something wasn't adding up, but he couldn't put his finger on it.
Yes, it seems that they've invited all of the elite from London, as well as ambassadors from other countries. We've already checked everyone out, and they are all who they say they are.
Ben sighed.
That actually worries me more. I assure you we have everything under control. We'd hate to have anything happen to the son of one of our colleagues.
It was their way of saying, stay out of it. But that wasn't about to happen. Ben nodded.
I'm sure you do. Now, if you'd excuse us, we have another appointment to keep. You're not staying for dinner?
Mr. Black asked, surprised.
Sadly, no. We are only here for a few short days, and my father had many people he wanted me to meet with. Thank you again for your time.
Ben stood and held a hand out to Deirdre. He gave her credit for the cool expression she wore as she followed him away from the table. Now, if he could just get her out of here before Mr. Black changed his mind about letting him go. When he got outside, he picked up his pace and didn't speak until they'd gotten a few blocks away.
How good is your British accent?
He checked behind him to make sure they weren't being followed. It could be better. Why? Ben turned down an alley and pulled her up against the wall. He felt her shaking, heard her intake of breath as he closed in. He put his lips to her ear.
We have to fit in. Our American accent will give us away in seconds. If you don't feel confident, don't speak until we're back to the apartment. Got it?
She nodded, brushing her cheek against his. Ben reached up and caressed her chin and ran his thumb along her cheekbone. He really wished he wasn't here on business. The way her mouth parted, inviting him, was too much. He leaned forward and pressed his lips against hers. Sparks ran through him. An electric wave that he'd never felt before ran through him. A hunger. She melted into his arms as they stood in the middle of an alley in what could be enemy territory. With a groan, he pulled away from her. They had to get out of there.
Okay, ready?
Deirdre appeared as dazed as he felt, but she nodded. Ben held his arm out and she slipped her arm through his. They checked the street before leaving the alley. 3 blocks later, he flagged down a taxi and gave the directions back to the apartment. Deirdre held tightly to his hand, her lips in a thin line.
Hey, we'll be okay.
Ben squeezed her hand and watched out the window. It was a relief when they finally pulled in and climbed out. Deirdre dropped into a chair in the kitchen and rested her head in her arms while Ben rushed over to the computer to check the cameras. Everything was the same as when they'd left. "What made you leave so quickly?" Deirdre asked. Her closeness made Ben jump.
They told us they hadn't heard from my dad for years. That was a straight-out lie. The banquet they mentioned is tomorrow night. They wanted us off the trail. And the fact that they'd already checked all of the ambassadors just didn't feel right. Carl doesn't seem like one who would mix his business affairs with government officials. That means one of 2 things. Either he's planning an even better heist at his party, or those officials aren't who they say they are.
Deirdre stared at him. "You got all of that out of the conversation?"
Yep. It's hard to trust people in this business when you've already had a few of your guys turned.
"What makes you think I can be trusted?" Ben turned to her, surprised.
You're genuine. You speak your mind, and you're Carlie's best friend. If you'd wanted to turn on her, you would have.
True, but what if I was just biding my time? She picked one of his cameras to inspect it. Ben laughed.
You make a good point. But I knew I could trust you as soon as I met you. Call it a gift. I know when someone isn't who they say they are.
Deirdre nodded. "I get it. My grandma has the same gift. Good luck getting away with stealing a cookie from her cookie jar."
I take it you know from experience?
"Me? Never," she grinned. "I'm going to change and figure out something to eat." Ben stood there, stunned.
Oh, man, I'm so sorry. I was in such a hurry to get out of there, I forgot we never ate.
Well, saving lives is important too. Dee left the room and Ben ran his fingers through his hair. Forgetting to eat during a stakeout was a normal thing for him, but he couldn't believe he'd forgotten this time. He made a call to an Italian restaurant to get some delivery, then went back to work. Deirdre came down humming and went to the fridge. "Unless we want eggs or baby food, I think we'll need to go shopping."
I ordered some food. It should be here in about 10 minutes.
Ben turned on the heat sensor and pointed it toward Carlie's apartment. There was still just the 2 people sitting at the table.
Hey, Deirdre, come check this out.
She came over and stood next to him. Her touch was like fire to him, especially after the kiss they'd shared in the alley. He slid an arm around her to move her closer to the screen.
What do you see?
"The same 2 people," she gasped, "but they're different somehow."
That's what I thought.
He looked down at what she was wearing. The hot pink sweat she'd used as a disguise wasn't going to cut it.
Do you have anything dark? I'm thinking you're going to stand out if we try to break in.
Deirdre bit her lip. "I guess I should have thought about that when I was shopping earlier. I guess comfy isn't the way to go for now."
Maybe check the closet. We'll replace it if we need to.
Got it. Deirdre left the room again and Ben followed so he could change as well. He pulled out his black clothes, then checked to see if there was anything he had for Deirdre. The small room only held baby clothes, so the owners weren't much help. He had some jeans and black hoodie, which would have been better than the hot pink she was wearing. "Hey, Dee." He stopped himself. He'd never called her by her nickname before, and it just felt odd. "Deirdre, I have..." Whoa. She'd opened the bedroom door wearing black yoga pants and a black surf top. Her hair was pulled back into a bun.
How's this?
"That's perfect."
Well, apparently this lady is a yoga instructor or something because her closet was full of these pants. Thankfully, they fit.
"That's better than what I could have come up with. Okay, we'd better head out." Ben threw the jeans and hoodie back onto the bed and grabbed his shoes. Deirdre stood in the hall holding the gun she'd been given in the car.
The only problem is, where am I going to put this?
Right. Ben grabbed a belt from his bag and looped it around her waist. He took the gun from her and slipped it into the holster and stood straight to find her face inches from his. If they were going to save Carlie, he really needed to stop standing this close to her. "And you're sure you know how to use this?" She shrugged.
I guess we'll see.
Ben hoped it wouldn't come to that. They checked the cameras again, but the figures hadn't moved at all. "We'll only have a couple of minutes before someone notices that we're in there. I'll case the apartment while you go for that table. Got it?"
Got it.
Her face was pale, but Ben hoped she'd be okay. They opened the back door to find the delivery guy standing there with bags. Ben pulled out cash and handed it to the guy. "Whoa, are you two cosplaying or something? You look awesome." "Yeah, we're headed to Comic-Con. Make sure you don't say anything. Wouldn't want to give away our identities." The man held a finger up to his lips. "I won't say anything. Good luck. Maybe I'll see you there." "Maybe so." Ben waited for him to head to his car, then turned to Deirdre. "Make sure he leaves. I'll set this on the counter." They traded places and Ben set the food down. The smell of the lasagna was inviting, but that could wait. He had work to do.
He's gone.
Deirdre set her hand on the gun.
I can't believe he actually thought we were cosplaying something.
"It's easier than trying to explain the fact that we're spies trying to take down a crime lord. I'm just glad he bought into the Comic-Con thing. I wasn't even sure there was one this weekend." Deirdre laughed.
I'm sure it's not for another few weeks. Let's go.
Ben opened the door and they ran across the street to the van. There was no one in the front seats, so he crept to the back. The doors were locked, but he had it opened in seconds with his toolkit. Empty. Whoever had been in there was now gone, which could make getting into the house much harder. The gate creaked as they opened it, but there wasn't much they could do about it. Ben went first and unlocked the front door, then slowly opened it. Silence. He waved for Deirdre to head up the stairs toward the kitchen, then followed closely behind. Her movements were graceful as she moved from one room to the next. The only time she made noise was when she gasped at seeing Carlie and Braden tied to the chairs. Deirdre pulled the tape off of Carlie's mouth, then moved to the ropes binding her hands. Ben took Braden. They were bruised and had a few lacerations on their faces, but they were alive. The relief was mixed with an urgency to get them out of there. "Is there anyone else here?" Ben whispered. Carlie shook her head and grimaced in pain. "They left." Ben raised his eyebrows and gave a thumbs up to Deirdre, and she nodded. She could take care of them, and he'd check the rest of the place out. The apartment was almost identical to the one he was staying in, but it had a deserted feel to it. The rooms were bare, except for 2 mattresses lying on the ground. Carlie's and Braden's clothes were strewn across one room as if their captors were searching for something, which meant all the tech that Ben had given them at one time or another was probably gone. Once he was sure everything was clear, he packed up their things and went back to the kitchen. Carlie stood at the sink with the glass of water while Braden still sat at the table. "We need to get you two out of here. We have a place across the street. Any chance they left anything of value?" Carlie shook her head and helped Braden stand. Deirdre helped Carlie while Ben put his arm around Braden. They went through the back door and Ben made sure to lock it behind him. Braden had taken most of the abuse from the captors and limped along, gasping with each step. Ben would have to find a doctor he could trust to check on his injuries. It was another 20 minutes before they were finally back in Ben's apartment. Braden had to sit on the steps and climb up that way. The smell of the food they'd had delivered filled the kitchen as Ben and Deirdre got out plates and silverware.
Let's eat first, then you can fill us in. We don't have much time to act.
Carlie took a bite of her food and sighed. This is so good. We haven't eaten since yesterday.
So, I take it AJ has something to do with this?
Ben took a bite of his food. Carlie was right. It was delicious. He picked us up at the airport, pretended like he was helping us out, and then we were attacked. Ben frowned.
How'd AJ know where to find you?
We assumed you'd sent him to pick us up. Braden's voice was quiet, and he grimaced when he tried to swallow. When we got to the auction, we were ambushed. Apparently, they recognized us from Thailand. Things still didn't add up.
So there had to have been someone at the exhibit that night that knew you were leaving.
That's what we think too. We were so busy watching for Frank that we didn't pay much attention to anyone else. So what's our next move? Deirdre leaned against the sink, away from everyone else. Carlie glared. Before we plan that, I want to know what you're doing here. Why aren't you in New York with Danny?
They came after us there too. I tried to send her home, but she got around me and onto the plane.
Ben sighed.
I'm sorry.
I'm not. You were in trouble again, and I wasn't going to just sit at home.
Carlie rubbed her forehead. And now you're in even more danger. We need to get you out of here. Braden took Carlie's hand. No, that wouldn't do any good. I think she can help. Deirdre sat down next to Carlie. I can. I'm the one who figured out you'd been kidnapped. Ben had to work on another story, so I sat and watched the traffic feed. No, that's not what I mean. Braden took a drink of water. They know us. They recognized us immediately. But they don't know her. Or Ben. He's always in the shadows. Carlie stared at Deirdre before shaking her head. No, I think it's time to back out. Your leg is messed up. We're compromised. It's time to go. Deirdre slammed her hand on the table.
Would you stop treating me like I'm fragile? You have no idea what I can do. Besides, you haven't let me try. I'm here. I'm staying. You want that emerald? Let's get it.
Whoa, Deirdre, I'm not sure I agree.
Ben stopped at the glare from her.
Look, we have one shot. Let's take it.
Deirdre's eyes flicked between the three of them, and Ben couldn't help the spark of pride he felt for her. Braden squeezed Carlie's hand. Let's try it. If it's too dangerous, we pull out. Unless she's dead first. Carlie grumbled and left the table. Ben grabbed his phone and pulled out the article that he'd typed up about the guy in the park from a few days before.
Read this.
Carlie took the phone and frowned as she read the news article. She let out a sigh and handed the phone back to Ben. Fine. This proves she walks into danger without thinking. How does that help?
Remind you of someone?
Ben lifted an eyebrow.
We weren't prepared for this, and you know it. You took off before I had any intel on anything happening here. Deirdre was able to help me figure out where the auction was going to take place. She's good. Why not see what else she can do?
They're right. You know that. Braden's voice was slowly getting stronger. We'll go over everything after we got some sleep. Do you happen to have any painkillers? Deirdre grabbed her purse and sorted through it before holding out a bottle. Take what you need. I brought it just in case. Braden took it from her and limped to the cupboard to get a glass. Carlie sighed and gave her friend a hug. I'm sorry. I really am happy to see you, but when you showed up at the apartment, it scared me to death.
And seeing you tied up was any better?
Deirdre hugged her back. You two go get some rest. I want to go over a few things with Ben. Carlie shook her head and put her arm around Braden's waist. It's so weird to have you call him Ben. They went into the living room since Braden couldn't take the stairs. Carlie helped him onto the couch, then curled up in a blanket on the floor next to him. Ben turned to the computer and pulled up every piece of intel he could find about the London crime network. It was time to get this done and get home. Chapter 10. Dee leaned back in her chair and rubbed her neck. They'd been going over information for hours now, And while she loved it, she was still bored out of her mind. It had been silent since Carlie and Braden went to sleep. Neither she or Ben wanted to wake them, so if they did talk, it was through text. Morning had come and gone by the time Carlie walked into the kitchen, yawning. The rings under her eyes had faded. "I'm going to run up and take a shower. If Braden wakes up, can you make sure he gets more ibuprofen?" "Of course," Dee smiled. "Your stuff is up in the master bedroom." "Thanks." Carlie paused at the doorway. "And Dee, I really am glad you're here." Dee smiled. "Me too." Ben sighed and sat back in his chair. "Okay, we have your identity set. It's possible they'll be watching extra close since you were just added to the contact list. But as long as you play your part, you should be fine."
Slipping in an Australian accent with my American accent is doable. And making it believable, we'll see. But I'll do my best. Dee wasn't convinced, but languages didn't exactly come easy for her. It was better to pretend to be a struggling actress than pretending like she was from another country. "And you have yours down?"
"There's a reason I stay behind the camera, but I'll make it work."
He dropped into his Aussie accent at the drop of a hat. Wow. Dee wasn't sure Ben could have been any more attractive. But with that accent, he had just proven her wrong. Oh, hey, I think I hear Carlie. I'm going to go get changed." She passed Carlie on the stairs, but kept going. She didn't want Carlie to see the blush creeping up on her face. Ever since that kiss, Dee had been a wreck around Ben. She'd imagined kissing him for weeks, but nothing could have prepared her for the fireworks that had gone off in her head at the touch of his lips against hers. The shower helped calm her nerves. Well, mostly. She was about to walk into a room full of criminals from all over the world, and she had to convince them that she was the real deal. The dress she'd picked out fit like a glove, hugging her curves. But the mop of hair on the top of her head, that was another problem. She opened the door. "Hey, Carlie, I could use some help." Carlie came around the corner and limped up the stairs. "Wow, that dress is fantastic. Did you just get it?" "Yeah. Ben sent me out shopping yesterday so we'd be ready. You don't think it's too much?" Dee checked herself in the mirror again. "Are you kidding? It's perfect. I went over the notes from Ben, and this fits the role just right." She gestured toward the bed. "Sit, and I'll see if I can do something with your hair." Dee handed Carlie the brush. "I can't believe you do this all the time. I feel so sick to my stomach." Carlie laughed. "That never really goes away. You just have to fight through it because if you don't, you'll give yourself away." "That doesn't help much," Dee sighed. "You think I can do this?" Carlie was silent as she went to find a blow dryer. She plugged it in and turned to Dee. "Honestly, I think you'll do great. The only reason I hesitated was because I was angry that you even have to be here." She turned on the blow dryer, which paused the conversation. Dee ran through everything for that night, from the moment they get out of the car until the emerald was in hand. By the time the dryer was turned off, she was positive this wasn't going to work. "Hey, look at me." Carlie moved in front of her. "You'll be fine. We're going to make sure you're set. Braden and I will be with you every step of the way. And besides, you'll have Ben next to you." She grinned. "I can't even believe how adorable you two are together." Dee ducked her head to hide the red she knew was creeping up her neck and face. "Why didn't you tell me he was so dreamy?" "Because I'd never actually met him before until we were at the exhibit. Everything was over the phone and internet. It was safer that way." Carlie went back to working on Dee's hair. "When Danny called me, frantic that you'd met some crazy person at a grocery store, I wondered if you'd gone off the deep end. But then, to find out it was the guy I worked with every single day, mind-blowing." "You're telling me." Dee reached for the makeup sitting on the bed. She needed to be doing something so she could ignore her nerves. "He kissed me." The squeal from Carlie matched the one going on in Dee's head. "Was it amazing?" "It was.
perfection. But it's one of those things where I don't know if it's because we were just in the moment or if it meant something.
Carlie stuck a bobby pin in Dee's hair. Believe me, I see the two of you look at each other, and I can guarantee there's something there. You're in good hands with him. Dee applied her lipstick before answering. The red tint matched her dress perfectly.
I know that. I just hope he knows that.
This, my friend, is why your relationships are so short. Have faith in the guy. Carlie stepped back and picked up a small mirror. Okay, what do you think? It was like Dee had stepped back in time. Carlie had pulled it up into a twist with waves on each side.
Where'd you learn to do this?
Lots of practice. I've had to do this for a couple of my other missions. Carlie fixed a few of the bobby pins. I'm pretty sure Ben won't be able to keep his eyes off you, which is the point. We want him enamored with you so he's willing to give you anything, including a $3 million emerald.
Oh, please don't tell me what it's worth.
Dee added eyeshadow, eyeliner, and mascara.
Okay, I think I'm ready.
Carlie nodded. You are. Which is good because you two need to be heading out in the next few minutes, and we still haven't bugged you. They went down to the kitchen where the guys sat at the table. They looked up when Dee and Carlie walked in. Ben's eyes grew big and his mouth dropped open. Wow, you clean up well. Brayden loved to tease Dee. One reason she loved him. Thanks. Dee stood still so Carlie could weave the bug through her hair. Ben finally stood and fumbled with the other bug that he put in her clutch. He cleared his throat. You look beautiful, and I have to compliment your shopping skills as well. How'd you get the size just right? Hey, don't question a girl's shopping skills. Dee took the clutch from him and allowed him to put her shawl on her shoulders. Believe me, I won't after this. Okay, you two, we should be there in about 15 minutes. Be listening for anything out of the ordinary. Carlie handed him the keys. We know, Ben. Good luck. And make sure nothing happens to her. You have my word. Ben put a hand on the small of Dee's back and guided her out to the limo that waited for them. They climbed in and Dee checked again to make sure the gun was in her clutch. Ben took her hand and caressed it with his thumb as they headed into the center of the city.
Did you find out if there were going to be ambassadors there tonight?
Dee knew she was grasping for a topic, but the silence was getting to her. I believe so, which means this isn't just about getting the emerald. We have to make sure the ambassadors leave with everything they own. He sighed. I just wish I was the one at the computer. Dee ran her fingers along his arm.
You'll do fine. We've gone over everything 1,000,000 times.
I know. I'm good with that. It's the hidden variables that I don't like. Too many things that could go bad.
Well then, we just have to pray that things go as planned.
It was easier said than done. Dee was glad she hadn't eaten much that day because she was sick to her stomach. The building they pulled up to was enormous. Cars pulled up and pulled away as lights flashed on the streets. Tourists and the press stood there to get pictures of the people heading into the party. This is going to be crazy once things get started. Ben climbed out of the car and helped Dee out. He ushered her in, his arm wrapped around her waist. Excitement took over the nausea, and Dee slipped into character. She was an actress. True, no one would have heard of her if they asked, but that was beside the point. She could do this. The lobby of the building had large chandeliers and rich carpets. It took her breath away to think about how much money had been spent to decorate this place. Probably more than she'd make in 5 lifetimes. Don't stare, Ben whispered. You're used to this, remember? She nodded and giggled like he'd said something hilarious. They were ushered into the ballroom, and it took every ounce of self-control not to stop and stare. An orchestra played at one side of the room, and people danced in the center. She felt insignificant standing next to these people and their millions of dollars. Ben leaned in and kissed her cheek and neck, then nibbled at her ear. Relax. You're too tense. You're just like these people. Except that she couldn't breathe. Ben had sent all her senses in a frenzy, and she just wanted to collapse. Instead, she nodded and forced a smile before returning the kiss.
Good. Now we'll mingle on our way over to the sitting room. Braden is getting me the password right now. Got it?
She nodded and did her best to keep walking with weak knees. It wasn't like Ben was her first kiss. It blew every other kiss out of the water, but it was still just a kiss. She straightened and held her head high. She was an actress. "Phoebe, is that you?" A woman smiled and pulled Dee in for a fake hug. Ben gave Dee a faint nod of the head. It was time. She squealed, mentally thanking Ben and Carlie for drilling names into her head. "Darla, sweetie, how are you?" Her accent could be worked on, but that was the point of the role they'd given her. Darla squealed back and shoved her hand in Dee's face. "Look, I finally got engaged. Isn't it wonderful?" "Wow, look at the stone. He must really love you." Dee personally thought it was too gaudy, but it wasn't her ring. "Oh, darling, it isn't love. But you knew that already?" Darla laughed. "Oh, there he is with my champagne. Excuse me, I'll see you later tonight." And she was gone before Dee could say anything else. Apparently, Darla didn't care that she had no idea who Dee actually was. Ben had managed to bribe the papers and media to broadcast the fact that the up-and-coming actress was there that night. Another woman forced herself between Dee and the room they were heading for. "How was your audition, sweetie? I heard about the food poisoning before. Just tragic." "It went well. I'll hear in the next few days. And how was your husband these days?" The woman's face was vaguely familiar, but Dee couldn't remember her name. "Good one." Carlie laughed into the microphone. "Mention her dog next. She loves poodles. Female dog, Mrs. Snuggles." The woman batted her eyes. "Oh, you know Albert. He's off on another one of his adventures. China, I believe." "Ah, I'm sure your dog loves having your attention to herself." "Thank you, Carlie." "Oh, she does." The woman laughed. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I see the Duke over there. I must see how his reflux is. I have the perfect solution for it." Dee moved quickly through the crowd, and Ben had to catch up. The quicker she could get to the sitting room, the better.
Phoebe, save me a dance later?
A man leaned down and kissed her hand. Braden's voice almost made her jump. "Say yes and move on. He's a player." "I would be delighted." Dee tipped her head in acknowledgement. "Oh dear, I need to catch up to my date." Ben had pushed ahead and was talking to an older couple. He turned when Dee walked up and pulled her to him.
"This is Phoebe. Isn't she beautiful?"
"She's an angel." The woman kissed each cheek. "Edward here was just telling me you are an aspiring actress." "Edward?" "I am. I've had several auditions over the last few months, and I expect to hear back any day now." "Well, I have no doubt you'll be a star." The woman patted Dee's hand. Dee smiled. "Thank you." They continued on to the sitting room and finally reached the rather large bodyguards who stood on each side. A strange thing to have in a place like this. She stood back and let Ben take charge.
"The cock crows at midnight,"
Ben said. The guards exchanged glances before they both made the same sign with their hands. Ben did it back and elbowed Dee. She jumped and copied their sign. When they were satisfied, they opened the door and allowed Dee and Ben through. Gambling tables had been set up, and heavy smoke filled the air from the cigars being smoked throughout the room. They were ushered past the tables and through to yet another room. Dee's stomach clenched in fear as everyone stared up at them. The man at the end of the table drummed his fingers on the table.
"You're late." "Yes, I apologize. Your guests were quite friendly and held us up."
Ben pulled out a chair and gestured for Dee to sit, then took the chair next to her. He took her hand and kissed it, never looking away from the man who Dee assumed was Carl.
"Very well, let's proceed."
A man cleared his throat.
"As I said before, these goblets were found in South America. It is said they were found near the city of El Dorado. The gold is pure, the workmanship unrivaled. We'll start the bidding at $5 million.
Dee nearly choked on the ice water set in front of her. Those goblets were more than she'd see in 3 lifetimes. But the bidding war had begun. Ben and Dee bid on a few of the items when Carlie asked them to, but their money wouldn't go anywhere. It was meant for the emerald. It was just past midnight when the alarm went. Chaos broke out as cries of robberies ran through the crowd. Carl excused himself and the rest of the group fled. Dee and Ben ran for the treasury room and emptied all the cash they'd hidden in Ben's coat. It would more than cover the cost of the emerald. Ben set it all down on the table next to the emerald display while Dee snatched the stone and shoved it into the holster under her dress. Then they were out of there. They'd search Ben, but wouldn't touch Dee. The gambling room was completely clear by the time they went through. Everyone had gathered in the ballroom where it was still chaos. Necklaces, rings, bracelets, pocket watches, and wallets were being claimed as stolen. Dee studied everyone around her. No one from the auction stood in that room, including Carl. Whoever had taken everything was now long gone. But why leave the treasure in the room? Ben tried to pull her through the crowd, but Dee hesitated. Carlie would love to get her hands on the other artifacts. Right now was the perfect chance to grab them. But would that make her any better than the other people in that room? They made it back to the limo and climbed inside. Ben pulled out his gun and didn't relax until they were back at the apartment. The limo driver let them out, and they scrambled inside. Braden and Carlie stood inside holding their bags. "Ready? We need to get that thing out of here." Carlie held her hand out. Dee turned and pulled it out of the holster. That was terrifying. You did a great job. And for the record, if you ever actually wanted to audition for a movie, I think you'd get the part. That was fantastic. Carlie hugged her tightly. I can't believe we got it. As they made plans to get back to the airport, Dee couldn't help the guilt that had settled over her. They'd paid for the emerald, so it wasn't that. But all those people had been robbed that night, and Dee had done nothing. Are you coming, Dee? The car will be here soon. Ben's voice made her jump. She turned away from the window. So, we're just going to leave now? Ben's eyebrows shot up. Of course. We have the stone and we saved Carlie and Braden. And you don't worry at all about all the ambassadors that had their things stolen tonight? That doesn't bother you at all? Dee, there's nothing we can do. We weren't even in the same room as everyone else. We have nothing to go off of that could help us. Dee glanced past him. Do you two feel the same way? We have to get this out of here before we're caught again. Carlie wrapped the stone in a pair of socks and set them inside a box that went inside another box and into her purse. The faces of the people she'd met that night ran through her mind. They'd be ingrained there, screaming for justice. Most of them could afford more jewelry, but that wasn't the point. Dee pointed at the box in Carlie's purse. You two get this out of the country. Ben, you can go with them if you'd like. I can't just leave until the thieves are caught. I'm sorry. It's going to haunt me until the job is completely done. We left a crime scene, and no one will pay for the robberies that happened tonight. The others exchanged glances before Ben cursed under his breath. Do you have any leads that we could follow? Or are we going in blind again? I don't have much, but it's better than nothing. Ben pulled Carlie into a hug. Get Braden out of here. We'll meet you at home. I'll have my dad waiting for you when you get there. But no, you're injured, and you have a very expensive stone sitting in your luggage right now. You need to leave. Ben opened the door. Go. You know Frank could be here any minute for that thing. That was enough to get them to leave. Dee waved as they went around the corner. Her stomach dropped when Ben turned to face her. You have 3 days to figure out what happened, and then we're leaving. Dee threw her arms around his neck. Thank you. That's plenty of time. Chapter 11. Ben couldn't understand why he was still sitting in the apartment in the middle of London. He should have been on the plane and on the way back to America by then. Instead, he was here going off the whim of a woman he was quickly falling in love with. He shook his head and shut his laptop. There had been nothing reported from the night before. How a robbery occurred at a highly publicized event was a mystery, and it really bugged the reporter in Ben. He knew Deirdre was right. There was a story here, and they knew the players, but not how they did it. Deirdre wandered into the room and dropped into the chair. She laid her head on her arms.
Oh, I didn't even drink anything, and I feel like I have a hangover.
That's all the adrenaline wearing off.
Ben yawned and slid the notebook over to her.
Here's what I have so far. See if you can make any sense of it while I grab a quick nap.
Deirdre opened the laptop as Ben stood and left the room. He dropped into the bed and closed his eyes. Every ounce of him ached, but his mind wouldn't allow him to rest. A vehicle started up across the street, and Ben's eyes flew open. The van was being moved. He scrambled over to see the van pulling away. What if the information was over there? Ben rubbed his forehead as he tried to picture the layout in the house. He'd been more interested in saving his friends and making sure no one else was there to pay attention to papers or equipment. He pulled out his phone.
Hey, what equipment did you have with you in the other apartment?
It would be another few hours before Carlie landed. It was time to sleep. His mind had cleared somewhat, but as he drifted off, he pictured all of the people he'd talked to that night. Something had to click in his mind. A scream pierced through Ben's dreams. He bolted out of bed and grabbed his gun, then ran for the stairs. Deirdre stood in the center of the room. Frank stood next to her with a gun to her head.
There you are, Ed. I'd wondered if you'd ever left with your friends.
Frank grinned.
Let her go. She has nothing to do with this.
Ben kept his hands up as he moved toward Deirdre. Frank laughed.
We both know that's not true. I have surveillance showing her grabbing it and you two dropping off money. Now where is it?
What does it matter? We bought the thing fair and square. Let her go.
Ben held his gun steady.
No, I don't think I will. I need insurance.
Frank shot forward and grabbed Deirdre's wrist. Ben aimed it at Frank's head.
Let her go.
Frank's eyes lit up.
Wow. Did little Eddie finally find someone who actually likes him? That makes her even more intriguing.
He leaned forward to give Deirdre a kiss on the cheek, and a loud crack echoed through the house. Frank's face showed surprise as he dropped to his knees. Deirdre jumped to the side with a sob. Don't mess with my best friend. Carlie dropped the gun and stepped over Frank to get to Deirdre. Did he hurt you? Ben helped Braden up the stairs and over to the kitchen table.
What happened to getting the emerald out of here?
We couldn't just leave you two here to find whoever stole all that jewelry. The emerald is on the way to America. It'll be picked up by the museum.
Braden's face was pale, and he was sweating profusely. I'm glad we got back when we did.
So am I.
Ben grabbed a glass of water and medicine for Braden, then knelt next to a sobbing Deirdre.
Come here.
Carlie let go, and Deirdre allowed Ben to pull her in for a hug. She sobbed into his shoulder until she could calm down. She sat up and glared at the body that sat in the doorway.
What are we going to do with him?
He's a wanted criminal. We're going to move all of our stuff to a completely different location since this one's been compromised. Then we'll call the police. Braden, stay there. Everyone else, let's move.
Ben packed up his equipment while Carlie and Dee took the bedrooms upstairs. He'd have to pay the family extra to get better security. Braden found wipes under the counter and wiped down cupboards, counters, and everything else they might have touched. No need to leave extra fingerprints. This would be a simple robbery as far as the police were concerned. They left the house and Ben looked back. Frank had been one of his first members of his team, and now this. He shook his head and walked away, leaving the door open. Money had been wired to the family's account to pay for the frames and other items that had been destroyed to look like a robbery. Sometimes he hated his job. The hotel they stayed in looked out over an old train station. Braden was now being checked out by a doctor on staff, and the police had been called to find Frank. But there was still a loose end out there somewhere. He just couldn't put his finger on it. Deirdre came to stand beside him at the window.
Braden's leg is broken. They're going to get a cast on it as soon as the swelling goes down.
Ben put an arm around her and held her close.
That's great. The museum now has the emerald in their possession as well.
And yet, you still look like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders.
He bent down and kissed her forehead.
It just seems too easy.
Deirdre frowned.
What do you mean?
Frank just happens to show up at our apartment, and I would have thought the security would have been a lot higher around their priceless stolen artifacts. It's like they wanted us to find it.
Well, Frank was the one who found Carlie and Braden across the street. It's not that far off, is it?
Ben left the window and dropped onto a couch.
AJ is the one who told Frank. He sold us out.
AJ. That was what bothered Ben. Where had he gone? Ben grabbed his laptop and hesitated before doing a search for the bodyguard. The results were grisly. The man had died in a rather gruesome death. Ben had to close the story before he read any more. So not only were his teammates turning on Ben, they were ending up dead afterward. Someone was coming after his team, and Ben was the only one left who hadn't been injured or killed. He froze. Things had been going smoothly until Deirdre showed up in New York. She touched his arm and he jerked out of the way.
Carlie, can I talk to you for a bit?
Carlie looked over in surprise.
Sure.
They walked into one of the rooms and Ben closed the door.
How well do you know Deirdre?
Carlie raised an eyebrow. Since I was a freshman in college. Why? Are you asking for my permission to date her or something?
No.
Ben paced the floor.
I've lost Frank, AJ, and I don't even know how many other people since she showed up in New York.
Are you insane? Carlie burst into laughter. No, seriously. You're insane. Are you seriously? Ben caught her arm and pulled her around to face him.
Can you blame me? I've been trying to figure out why things are so off, and it all leads to one event. One.
Carlie shook her head, disgusted. Well, then you need to learn to count again because you just came up with the wrong answer.
Can you blame me?
Yes, I can. Figure out who it is and stop pointing fingers at the 3 people sitting in this room that have helped save your life. Dee could have put an end to any one of us countless times, but she hasn't. She pushed her way around him and opened the door. She turned back. This business has jaded you, man. Get out while you still can. The door slammed, leaving Ben standing there by himself. He hadn't missed the look of shock on Deirdre's face when Carlie walked out. Carlie could have been right. Maybe he was jaded, but he'd just lost the last of his team. He opened the door to grab his laptop and Dee was standing there, fuming. He moved past her and grabbed his computer. If things had been tense before, he just made it 1,000 times worse. But he had to know. Instead of going back into the room, he stayed out with the others. He'd possibly made a mistake, but until he figured out who it was, no one was in the clear.
I need a list of people this could be.
Ben pulled up a document and began typing. Anyone he'd talked to in the last few weeks went on the list. Dad, Lenny, Dorothy, Frank, AJ, whoever kidnapped Braden and Carlie, Mr. Black and cohorts, Italian food delivery guy, Darla. The room was dead silent as he typed. Ben sighed as he ran through the list over again, trying to figure out who he was missing. When no one spoke for another few minutes, Ben sighed.
Fine. Let's just go with who I came up with.
As he listed them off, the others stayed silent, but he could tell they were at least listening to him. That was a bonus, at least.
What about the guys your dad sent to help us at the hotel?
Deirdre asked.
They helped us, but maybe they were double agents.
Ben nodded.
Right. I'll add them. What about the lady that sold you the airline ticket? Did she seem suspicious at all?
Deirdre shook her head.
No. She wondered why I was getting a last-minute ticket, but the only thing she said was that I shouldn't do it again.
Got it. Carlie, Braden, want to add any more?
Carlie walked over and glanced through the list again. Who's Mr. Black?
Dad's contact.
Ben ran a search for him through the database, but nothing came up, even as an alias. Strange. He'd been there before dinner that night. He found the security cameras from the restaurant and went back to the night of their dinner. He fast-forwarded until he and Deirdre showed up on the camera.
There.
The camera was grainy, like most were, but it was clear enough to get their face. Carlie gasped. That's them.
Yeah, that's Mr. Black. We'd asked for help and they were kinda...
No, that's who grabbed us. He's the one who broke Braden's leg. Carlie reached past Ben and zoomed in. It was like all the air had been sucked out of the room. Ben hadn't thought of the connection.
You're sure?
I watched my husband's leg break from a baseball bat. Yes, I know who it was. We wouldn't give them information and they didn't like it. Carlie shuddered. You actually met with them? Ben paused, then pulled out a list he'd forgotten from his dad. Carlie still didn't know about their history.
I think you need to sit down for a bit.
They'd almost reached the 3-day limit Ben had given Deirdre, and they were no closer to finding Mr. Black than they were before. It was like his crew disappeared off the face of the earth. With the way things had been going, it could have been the case. Word of the burglary had finally leaked to the news, but the police were baffled. All they knew was that the power had gone out in the ballroom, and then things turned up missing. What they didn't report was that the ballroom was the only place in the building where there had been no power. Ben's phone rang, shattering the silence in the suite.
Hey, Dad, did you find anything?
No, they're clean from what I can find. I just don't understand it. These people were some of my best friends. They'd helped me start the organization in the first place.
Did something happen between you?
There was a pause.
No, not that I can remember.
You're sure?
Dad sighed.
Son, I've grown old. I gave this life up years ago. The only contact I have with them now is when you need a little extra boost on a mission. And even that's been a while.
Ben let out a breath.
Fine. Okay. If you can think of anything, please call me back. Of course. Love you.
The phone went dead and Ben laid his head on his arms. Carlie stood in the doorway. You'll be no good for anyone if you don't get some sleep. Ben shut his laptop.
I know, but I can't sleep while I know that someone out there is going after my team.
Look, we'll find them. There's not anyone else that we know of except the 4 people in this room. And as long as we don't go start accusing each other, we'll be able to figure this thing out.
You know I had to ask.
No, you didn't. But whatever. Go get some sleep. We'll figure this out tomorrow. Carlie turned and went back to her room. Ben stood and grabbed a pillow and blanket to sleep on the couch. Carlie was right, even though he didn't want to pause the search. The few short hours he'd had the night before wasn't enough to keep him going. Mr. Black had to slip up at some point, and Ben wanted to be there when it happened. Chapter 12. Dee wandered out of her room and went straight for the coffee maker. Sleep hadn't come easily. The fact that Ben had accused her of being a double agent was enough to do that. Even days later, it still got to her. As angry as Carlie was about it, Dee could almost understand. Almost. But the time they'd spent together, not to mention that kiss, should have cured him of any suspicion. It hurt. She just wanted to get out of here as soon as possible so she could move on with her life. Hoping that Ben would ever care about her was pointless now. He was still asleep on the couch, and the anger from last night slowly dissipated. Dee couldn't imagine living this kind of life constantly. She'd only been part of this life for a few days, and she already felt like she couldn't trust anyone. She wanted to go running, but knew that wasn't a good idea. Besides getting lost in London, they had people after them, and she was the only one who hadn't been attacked. Well, except when Frank showed up at the apartment. But sitting inside for days on end was beginning to get on her nerves. Dee went back to her room and changed into her sweats. She couldn't go outside, but there was a fitness center here that they'd passed on the way to their room. She grabbed a piece of paper and left a note on the counter where everyone could catch it, then grabbed a room key. It was still early enough that the fitness room was empty. She turned on the TV and turned on the treadmill. Her muscles rebelled at first, but they loosened slowly and it felt good to finally run again. The same news stories played continuously, and it wasn't until the third time around that Dee suddenly stopped, almost tripping. She turned up the volume. 3 suspects have been apprehended, but they insist they were nowhere near the manor that night. Several of the ambassadors at the party have dropped their lawsuits, but police are still unsure as to what happened here that night. In other news, Dee grabbed her key and pushed the button several times until an elevator stopped on her floor.
Come on, come on.
By the time she finally got up to the suite, Dee was ready to pull the door open herself. She fumbled with the keys and burst into the room. The others looked up in surprise, but Dee ignored them as she turned on the TV. The news had started back around on its cycle, and it was killing her to wait.
There, look.
We already knew all of this. Carlie took a drink of her coffee.
No, look, at the officer.
Dee pointed at the screen again. It was the lady from the restaurant.
And look who they have.
Ben scrambled to get closer. That's Darla from the party.
Yes, she didn't exactly seem like the criminal type, but she did talk to us.
And I can almost guarantee we know the other 2 people they apprehended. We need to get to the police station, now. He grabbed his key and put on his shoes. Dee looked down at the clothes she was wearing. There was no time for a shower. You 2 stay here. We'll be back as soon as we can. Wait. Carlie went to the desk and grabbed 2 microphones. You 2 don't do anything stupid. Brayden and I will be listening from here.
Okay, gotta go.
Dee chased after Ben and jumped on the elevator just as it was closing.
Are we sure we'll find them at the station?
Nope, but they need to know they have imposters. Although if they haven't figured that out by now. Dee handed one of the microphones to Ben and put hers in her ear.
Do you think those 3 people are okay?
Ben shook his head. If they are, they won't be by the time these people are done with them. You saw what they did to Brayden. The elevator opened, and Dee went to step out, but Ben grabbed her arm. About what I said.
No, you don't get to apologize for what you said. Not yet. It's better if we just stay business partners for now.
Dee wrenched her arm away and walked down the hall, forcing herself not to cry. That wouldn't help anyone. Ben flagged down a taxi and they asked for the nearest police station. The taxi driver raised his eyebrows, but he pulled out onto the road without saying anything. As soon as they got to the station, Ben handed the man a wad of cash and they took off inside. A bored-looking officer sat at the front desk. Hello, can I help you?
Yes, we're looking for the 3 suspects in that robbery the other night.
Dee caught Ben's facepalm. Maybe she should have let him talk. The woman smirked. Ma'am, we're packed full of robbery suspects. Perhaps you should be more specific. Excuse me, sorry. What she meant to say is that the news showed that 3 suspects were captured in the Carl Edmonds case, and we believe we have more details about that night. She turned to her computer and shook her head. That wasn't our office. Could you check the others, please? A sense of dread settled in the pit of Dee's stomach. It was just like they'd suspected. There's nothing in here. It's still an open case. The woman glanced between them. You say you have information? Ben hesitated. The woman they showed on the news was not a police officer. We have reason to believe that she was actually one of the people responsible for the robbery, and those supposed suspects are in mortal danger. Oh dear. Let me find the commissioner. The woman stood and left. Dee turned to Ben.
Think they can help?
They need to know they've been impersonated. That's a crime itself. It can't hurt to have more people helping. The commissioner came out behind the other officer. He was a large man with a don't mess with me demeanor. Please come with me. Ben sent a quick text as they followed the commissioner into his office. Now, please tell me everything you know. Dee repeated what Ben had said while he played with his phone. The commissioner took notes, then folded his hands in front of him on the desk. Do you have any proof? Ben slid his phone across the table. Do you know this woman? He looked down at the phone and shook his head. It could be a new recruit, but I've never seen her. That means nothing. Look, we know this woman. She was at the party, but the only crime she may have committed was talking to us. You 2 were there. His eyebrows lowered into a glare. And give me one reason why I shouldn't put you 2 into custody. Ben handed him another paper. I'm here on U.S. business. We're investigating 3 suspects.
This lady being shoved into the car spoke to us, and I believe she's been taken to find out more information about us. That's a serious allegation. And if we don't stop them right now, someone is going to die. Are you willing to let that happen?
The commissioner stared at Ben for a moment before reaching for the phone.
I want you to stay here. We'll investigate. If what you say is true, the streets aren't safe for either of you.
Ben nodded, and they waited for the commissioner to finish a call for a meeting to search for the rogue officer. As soon as he left to meet the group, Ben and Dee slipped out of the office and past the front desk.
Okay, so we know they're impersonating officers. They're not going to pull out any stops. Find any abandoned police stations.
He pulled out his phone, and Dee did the same.
Here, there's a whole side of them. The closest is here, Dartford.
Ben ran for the steps down to the tube. He searched the map, then jogged for the right train.
It's not the closest, but it's just close enough that they'd probably go for it.
Dee saved the page in case this one wasn't right, then pulled out her wallet to pay for a ticket.
I've got it.
Ben handed her a ticket and gestured toward the train coming in.
This is ours.
I could have bought my own, you know.
Ben scanned the small card.
I already had these in case we needed to get away. Scan it and come on.
Dee sighed and followed him onto the train. There were several stops between where they'd gotten on and the one they needed. So Dee settled into her seat. As they neared the edge of the city, they left the underground and the view opened up to the countryside. This was the first she'd seen farmland since she'd arrived in England, and she couldn't have been more thrilled. Well, it would have been better if they weren't searching for 3 killers, but she still enjoyed the view. The train stopped at the Dartford station and Ben was the first one off. Dee had to run to catch up. They followed the directions on his phone and pulled up as they came closer to the old station. A car sat out in front, and Dee recognized it from the news clip.
It's them,
she whispered.
You're sure?
Dee pointed at Ben's phone.
Check the picture of the car. This is it.
He pulled out his gun.
Stay behind me.
Dee rolled her eyes but did as he said. She hadn't brought hers with her, and she had no plans to die that day. One of the doors that had been boarded up was open in the back. Dee climbed over one of the boards and stood up straight. Sobbing came from one end of the building. Ben held a finger to his lips, then crept toward the old steps. Darla was tied up with 2 others, her fur coat covered in blood from her nose and forehead.
Please don't. I only met Phoebe that night. I promise.
Dee's anger flared. This poor girl was getting hurt because of her. She moved to enter the room, but Ben held her back. The woman from the restaurant laughed. Oh, dearie, I know, but isn't this fun? You give a wrong answer, I get to take out my anger. Excitement for everyone.
Are you getting this?
Dee whispered. Yes, hold on. The police are on their way, Carlie answered back. Always with the holding on. But Dee stayed where she was.
Darling, I told you not to mess with your prisoners.
Mr. Black appeared and kissed the woman. Well, she's not giving me answers. Ben stood and walked into the room.
Let her go. I have your answers.
Mr. Black pulled his gun, and the woman clapped with excitement. Ben moved to the chairs where Darla sat.
What do you want? This woman knows nothing.
Well, Benjamin, since you asked,
I want you.
Mr. Black pointed his gun at Ben's head. What do you think, Helen? Head or spleen? Dee jumped up and ran into the room.
Don't shoot. Please. We can help.
Oh, and he brought his girlfriend with him. This just keeps getting better. Helen pulled out her gun and pointed it at Dee.
No.
Ben's voice echoed through the building.
Don't touch her. Just me.
Quiet, Mr. Black shouted.
You're not in charge here. I am.
You say nothing. Dee's eyes widened. This guy had completely lost it, and things began to click.
You wanted to take over his dad's business, didn't you?
It was my job. I ran most of it, and he passed me over. The man's face was red as he kept shifting his gun between Ben and Dee. Ben held his hands up.
I had nothing to do with that. I'm sorry. I didn't know my dad was even part of it until 2 weeks ago.
That was the wrong thing to say. Mr. Black smacked Ben with his gun. I made one mistake, and he took everything from me. Everything.
Not everything, sweetie. You still have me. Helen patted him on the arm. A gunshot rang out, and Helen's smile turned to shock as she looked down at the red blossoming from the gunshot in her torso.
What have you done?
She dropped to the ground, gasping for air. Whoa, now that's not cool. Dee took another step forward, but stopped when Mr. Black pointed the gun at Ben's head. A crackle sounded in Dee's ear.
The police are surrounding the area. Keep talking. Don't let him shoot.
What happened, Mr. Black? Can I ask that? What was the mistake? The man stared at Dee before answering.
Nancy. She was the agent every man loved. I would have done anything for her. We were on a job to get some ancient scrolls from ruins in South America. Nancy had fallen in love with one of the other agents. When I found out, I lost my mind and shot him. It didn't kill him, but Nancy took a step to go after him. The walkway crumbled under her. His voice broke. Her body was never recovered.
The room was suddenly flooded by policemen, and Mr. Black dropped to the ground. His broken sobs were heard over the rest of the chaos. Dee reached a hand out to Ben, and they left the building together. Ben was silent on the train ride back to the hotel. It wasn't until they were up in the room that Dee finally said something. Did you know that Nancy girl he was talking about? Carlie and Braden turned from their computers to wait for his answer. He finally sighed and nodded.
She was my aunt. And he's right. She was beautiful. He leaned forward. We knew she died in an accident. We just didn't know it was while she was on a mission.
Dee sat next to him and put an arm around him. I'm so sorry.
Everything I thought I knew about my life is turning out to be a lie.
He stood and packed his laptop in his bag.
Let's go home.
Dee stood and grabbed her bag from the overhead compartment. She was finally home, and she couldn't wait for the warmth of the Arizona sun on her skin. Carlie waited for Braden to get out of his seat, then got their bags. Ready for normal life? Dee asked as they walked down the aisle to leave the plane. Nope, but I should probably teach a class or two before I go on another adventure so I'm not fired. Dee laughed. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. What about you? Did you decide if you're going to visit your parents for the summer? No, I think I'll see if they'll let me enroll in summer classes. As much as I want the beach, I want to get done with school. Carlie raised an eyebrow. You're voluntarily going to take classes? I'm a little surprised myself. It's just that everyone around me has full-time jobs, and I'm still stuck here as a student. Time to move on. They walked into the airport and headed for the baggage claim. Dee didn't have much since most of her stuff was still in storage in New York, but she'd wait with Carlie and Braden. Danny stood with a sign, a huge grin on her face. You're back! Finally! Dee hugged her friend, then moved so Carlie could hug her. Thanks for picking us up. I didn't think you'd forgive me after I ditched you in New York. Danny brushed it away.
You were off saving these two. Besides, now that you found the emerald, we can go back.
Oh, right. Dee turned away. She wasn't sure if she was ready to go back to New York yet.
Okay, let's get out of here. I'll drive. You guys talk. I want to know everything.
Danny opened the trunk. Dee let Carlie and Braden do all the talking. Those last moments in the old police stations kept going through her mind. She'd barely slept since then because every time she closed her eyes, she saw Helen drop to the ground. Chapter 13. Ben stood in front of his dad's apartment, emotions warring with each other. He finally lifted his hand to knock.
You're back.
Dad opened the door wider and allowed him in. The room was cleaner than the last time Ben was here. Books were in boxes, and papers were no longer piled up.
Going somewhere? It seems that Mr. Black gave away my location along with the list of supposed crimes. All of them will lead back to him. But I still need to move while I still can.
Ben nodded.
You realize moving will just make you look guilty, right? To the real police, yes. But it seems that he did a good job of turning many people against me even before London.
I suppose I'm also in danger?
Dad patted him on the shoulder.
Only if you want to be. You can get out. Right now.
Ben sat on the old couch in the living room.
To be honest, I don't know. I don't want to leave Carlie in the lurch. But without a team, we can't do anything right now. What about the girl that was with you? Deirdre.
I'll be lucky if she ever talks to me again. I might have accused her of being the traitor. Dad chuckled.
Son, that happens in this profession more than you'll ever know. You can never be too careful. Give her a chance. You never know how she'll react.
You're probably right. Ben stood. I'd better get ready. I have to report on the exhibit tonight and I need a suit.
Good luck, son.
Ben reached for the door and paused.
Why didn't you ever tell us about Aunt Nancy? I didn't know until you told me. Mr. Black always told me it was an accident.
He shook his head.
It's amazing what jealousy will do to a man.
Is that why you gave the business to me? Dad smiled, but his eyes were sad.
I trusted no one else with it, and for good reason. But Ben, don't mess things up with Deirdre like I did with your mother. She saved your life.
Ben nodded and left. He wanted to make things right with Deirdre, but he had work to do in order to make that happen. Chapter 14. It had only been a few short months since Dee last stood in front of the museum, but here she was. This time Danny was with her, but it still didn't help the nerves bubbling in her stomach. It will be fine. He's probably not even here. Danny checked her makeup in the mirror. Ready? No. Dee allowed her friend to pull her up the steps and into the museum. Danny went straight to Carlie. Braden finally got his cast off, I see. Last week. Carlie gave each of them a hug. Congrats on graduating. How does it feel? Amazing. Dee sighed. Now comes the fun part. I have to be a grown-up and get a real job. Carlie laughed. What happened to the job at the travel agency? Dee made a face. They decided me going to England once wasn't enough experience. I swear it's a vicious cycle. You need experience to get a job, but you can't get experience without a job. Sounds about right. Carlie handed her a glass of champagne. Any news from Ben? Not for a while. We've texted back and forth, but he's been on some mission for the last month or so. Dee frowned. What I want to know is why you're not with him. Carlie rubbed her stomach and grinned. I'll be grounded for a while. Dee squealed and threw her arms around Carlie. Congratulations! When are you due? Spring, late April. Sweet. We might just share a birthday. Danny hugged her. Where is Braden? I want to congratulate him too. Carlie shrugged. I'm not sure. Oh, it looks like it's time for the presentation to start. They moved over to where the exhibit for the shipwreck stood. Carlie nudged Dee forward, and everyone clapped. One of the curators shoved a microphone in her hand, and Dee tried to hand it to Carlie. Nope, this is all you. Carlie pointed to the sign in front of the emerald. Dee's eyes widened. Deirdre Carlson was written in bold letters under the inscription. Her heart thumped wildly. That was her name. She searched the crowd, sure that this was a joke. It was true that she'd been the one to grab it, but it was Carlie's job. Dee was just there to help. Ben stepped forward and took the microphone from her. He grinned at the crowd and put his arm around Dee, which was a good thing. She was just about to collapse. It seems as though we caught Deirdre by surprise. He paused while the crowd laughed. I had the opportunity to go on this mission with her, and let me tell you, she was amazing in the face of danger. He leaned down and whispered, Are you ready to talk yet? All Dee could do was shake her head. Carlie stood there with tears in her eyes as she grinned back at Dee, and Danny looked like she was doing everything possible not to jump up and down. Since Deirdre is new to this whole treasure-finding thing, I decided now would be a good time to prepare her for her next mission. Who agrees with me? Dee clapped her hand to her mouth as the crowd went wild. Ben handed her some rope, a tablet, and some hiking shoes. Thank you. You're welcome. He turned back to the crowd.
Do you think she needs anything else? Yes? I know.
Ben went down on one knee, and Dee's heart thumped as he pulled out a box. It was larger than a ring box, so Dee breathed a little easier until he opened it. Inside was a small gun that was engraved with her name. A ring sat on the end of the gun, a large emerald in the shape of a heart. A gasp went through the crowd.
Deirdre Carlson, will you be my partner and my wife?
No one would have heard her answer anyway with all of the whistles and clapping, so she simply nodded and let him slip the ring onto her finger. He pulled her close, and his lips met hers. Everyone disappeared, and she was back in the alley, excitement flooding over her. When they finally broke apart, she grinned. Please tell me you know what our next assignment is. The end. This has been Emeralds Are Forever, Love on the Run Book 2, written by Jacqueline Hardy, narrated by Kimberly G. Tisor. Copyright 2019 by Jacqueline Hardy. Production copyright by Dragons and Fairy Tales Press.